Chapter 429. That one sentence made Heizei look as if his father had died. What was Bai Chio doing? Didn't he say that the princess would only arrive in a month? No. Bai Chio probably didn't know that she was a princess. Then was there a need for him to exempt the taxes? Half of the taxes had to be paid to the various levels before entering the national treasury. Zhao City was bitterly cold, so the emperor wouldn't care about the last bit of money. He would definitely allow it, but when the document was issued, he would be starving. He wanted to use the document to pretend to be an honest official, but now that the princess was here, there was no need for him to pretend. No, he had to call Bai Chio back. But right now, he had to coax the princess in front of him. He ruthlessly slapped himself in the face. Princess. He begged, it was me who didn't recognize Mount Tai, it was me who spoke nonsense. Please be magnanimous and don't be calculative with me. At this moment, the women in the backyard were scared silly. They stared at Gong Yimo, thinking that she was here to fight for favor, but they didn't expect her to be a princess. Gong Yimo sat on the chair that Heizei was sitting on, crossed her legs, and asked lazily. You wanted to have a taste of me before, do you want to have a taste now? She squinted her eyes when she said this, and her charming face was as dazzling as the sun above her head. Heizei looked at her and swallowed hard. But his remaining consciousness made him slap himself again, and he said with a sad face. How would I dare? Please forgive me, princess, and forgive me. Gong Yimo casually picked up a piece of snack and slowly ate it. Are you in a hurry now? What's the hurry? Gong Yimo blinked. You're in a hurry to stop Bai Chio. But I think it's useless. With Bai Chio's speed, it won't take long for the document to be sent out. At that moment, Heizei's face turned even uglier. His face turned green and white, and his heart was burning with anxiety. He suddenly fell silent and glanced at Gong Yimo, and his heart fell into a crazy struggle. After a while, he asked in a low voice, Why don't I see the princess's retinue? Gong Yimo smiled, Of course there's no retinue. You came alone. Heizei, who was kneeling on the ground, asked carefully. Gong Yimo nodded. Yes, I'm alone. There seemed to be some restlessness in the air. After a while, Heizei steeled his heart and stood up on his own. He stared at Gong Yimo and rolled his eyes. He guessed that what Gong Yimo said must be true. Otherwise, Bai Chio would not be so muddle-headed as to capture her. If that's the case, what is the purpose of your visit, princess? Gong Yimo shook her head. Just now, on the way here, I saw that the people in Zhaoqing were living in poverty while your prefect manor was luxurious and extravagant. I couldn't stand it and wanted to tell on you to Imperial Father. At this moment, even someone as timid as Heizei had an ominous glint in his eyes. Since that's the case, Princess might as well stay as a guest. Since Yu Qi is in danger, you can't blame me for your sudden disappearance. Men. As soon as he gave the order, many people ran in, scaring away the women in the courtyard, leaving only Gong Yimo. Arrest her for this official. Heizei was hesitant but still did as he was told. He had thought it through well. After capturing her, he would send someone to impersonate her. When someone asked, he would insist that the princess went missing in Yu Qi. The most important thing now was to stop Bai Chio. At that time, he wouldn't need to submit any documents and could even get a beauty for free. He really couldn't wait to have a taste of the princess. Seeing the people approaching, Gong Yimo said calmly, I'm not happy with you being like this. Heizei laughed, You can say this on the bed. As he said that, those people pounced forward. But Gong Yimo casually kicked a few times and sent those people flying. She didn't even leave the chair. This kind of martial arts was not something that those good-for-nothings in the border town could resist. Heizei never thought that Gong Yimo's martial arts were so powerful. He looked fierce and sent more than 400 of the 500 guards in Zhaoqing to capture Gong Yimo. The entire backyard of the governor's mansion was packed to the brim. Heizei anxiously watched from the side, thinking that no matter how powerful Gong Yimo was, he had more than 400 people. It was impossible that they couldn't catch her, right? The commotion here alarmed Bai Qiu. He had already sent out the documents but suddenly heard that almost all the city's military forces had gone to the administration office. He quickly followed to find out what was going on. But when he arrived, everything had already been settled. Bai Qiu walked in, and the more he walked, the more shocked he was. The floor was filled with guards who were beaten until they couldn't get up. Usually, they were the accomplices of the villain and were all arrogant. But now, they were lying on the floor and didn't even have the strength to move. What kind of monster was this? This was the sentence that was crazily spammed in Heizei's heart. How could a princess in the inner court be so powerful? More than 400 people. More than 400 people were not a match for her. He watched helplessly as Gong Yimo handled those people with ease. He was so scared that he knelt on the floor to repent and let Gong Yimo step on his back. At this time, Gong Yimo was sitting on a special rattan chair that he had brought over from outside the region. She was eating the delicious wine and pastries that were sent over from the neighboring city. Below her were her own people. Although Heizei wasn't injured, he wasn't in a good state. He was trembling and lying on the floor under Gong Yimo's feet like a servant. When Bai Qiu came in, he saw this scene. His first reaction was that this woman was a martial arts expert. His second reaction was that this woman was extremely daring. Heizei's father was a second-grade official in the capital. It was said that he had sought refuge with the Prince of Qi and was doing well in the capital. Offending Heizei, this woman probably wouldn't have a good ending. But he was the one who found this woman. Heizei probably wouldn't let him go. This was a bit of a headache. So he rushed in and roared. "Who are you? Why aren't you letting go of official He?" Heizei was just about to speak when Gong Yimo stepped on him. She smiled at Bai Qiu. "He's just an ant. So what if I don't let him go?" Bai Qiu sneered. "Country girls don't know what's good for them. Do you know who he is?" Gong Yimo blinked. "Who?" It seemed that she was really ignorant and fearless. Bai Qiu pointed at Heizei and sneered. "Have you heard of the Prince of Qi?" The Prince of Qi has an assistant who is a second-grade official in the capital. Official He is his second son. Gong Yimo touched her chin. "So?" Bai Qiu frowned with displeasure. "So you better let go of official He. Otherwise, if you alarm his father, I'm afraid that your family will be implicated by you." His words were threatening, and it wasn't baseless. In the past, Heizei really did have a political enemy. Later, that person was dealt with by the He family and retired early. Otherwise, Zhao City wouldn't have become like this, where Heizei had the final say. Chapter 430. Gong Yimo closed her eyes. "What if I don't release him?" Bai Qiu sneered. "Then you can wait for your family to be exterminated. If you still don't realize your error and alarm the prince, perhaps you can try the 18 kinds of torture in Zhao prison." Gong Yimo was angered by his words. She had never been to Gong Dai's Zhao prison because she deeply experienced that place and was traumatized. Especially when she looked at the person under her feet, he seemed to be hoping for a fluke because he knew that Gu country's princess was on good terms with Prince Qi. Perhaps she would let him go because of this. Seeing her silence, Bai Qiu threatened, "Are you afraid now? Since you know, why don't you let official He go? Let him go." Because she was afraid of Gong Dai. Gong Yimo laughed and shook her head, but her laughter was a little cruel, not to mention him, even if it was his father. He Axayan, "As long as I want, Gong Dai will also pluck his head for me to play with." her words made Bai Chio shocked. In this world, the only person who dared to call the prince by his name, other than the emperor and the crown prince, was that legendary princess. But that person was a princess, how could she be alone? Thus, he frowned and asked cautiously. You've dared to ask about your identity. Bai Chio became serious. Gong Yimo smiled brightly and sighed as she looked at the sky. It's not a great identity, but Gong Dai has to call me royal sister. Tell me, who am I? She curiously looked at Bai Chio's face, and as expected, his face suddenly turned ashen. But he still didn't believe that this person was a princess. At this moment, Kizé finally gave up and shouted. Kneel down. She's the eldest princess of Gu country. Holding the golden token arrow, she's like the emperor himself. Bai Chio was shocked and knelt down with a thump, his eyes filled with disbelief. Princess, how could he grab a princess so casually? Seeing him like this, Gong Yimo laughed, her voice clear and moving. She glanced at him and asked proudly, how is it, Big Beard, are you surprised and surprised? Alarm bells rang in Bai Chio's heart. Since ancient times, women were hard to deal with. Even if the person in front of him was a princess, he was afraid that she was a narrow-minded woman. Now, he had fallen into the hands of this woman before he could even get his revenge. Was he really suffering retribution for all the evil he had done? This humble subject didn't know that the princess had arrived. I beg for the princess forgiveness. Bai Chio thought for a while and decided to apologize first. His forehead was covered in cold sweat, and he kept thinking about how to get away. Oh. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows and tapped the coffee table beside her. What if I don't forgive you? Her words made Bai Chio's heart turn cold. He knew that women were the most difficult to deal with and the most unwilling to give up. He was already prejudiced against women. Seeing that Gong Yimo was not willing to let him go, he propped himself up and said coldly. If you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please. When Gong Yimo saw this, she was amused. He was a tough nut to crack. She directly threw a dagger in front of Bai Chio. Here, pick it up. Gong Yimo's voice came, but Bai Chio did not move. Could it be that this princess wanted him to commit suicide? Seeing that he did not move, Gong Yimo raised her hand and stared at her fingertips. She said faintly, didn't you say that you can kill me or torture me? Why don't you pick it up? Kizé, who was kneeling at his feet, was already scared out of his wits. It seemed that this princess was a woman who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He did not know how she would deal with him later. He scolded Bai Chio 1,000 times in his heart, but he was thinking of a way out for himself. Bai Chio was a little angry when he heard this. He picked up the dagger, but he thought in his heart, why should he listen to this woman? Could a princess force someone to commit suicide? Being stared at by his angry eyes, Gong Yimo slowly lay back and ordered, I don't need you to torture yourself. Let's play a game. Bai Chio frowned. He did not know what medicine she was selling in her gourd. Gong Yimo looked at him with a smile, as long as you shave your face clean, if you look better than the one at my feet, I will let you go and deal with him. If you don't look as good as him, unfortunately, I will have to deal with you first. Her licentious words immediately made Bai Chio feel disgusted. He felt humiliated for no reason. But now, the other party's martial arts skills were higher than his, her status was higher than his, even Kizé was kneeling at her feet. What reason did he have to refuse? Even if he was full of anger. But when he picked up the dagger in his hand, he faintly looked at Gong Yimo. He did not want to be humiliated like this. On the contrary, Kizé was more anxious, hurry up and do it, Bai Chio. This official orders you to do it quickly. Kizé thought very well. This Bai Chio was always outside and had a face full of beard. He must be very ugly and definitely could not be compared to him. When this princess went to deal with Baichio, he would push all the responsibility to Baichio and get himself out of trouble. Baichio naturally knew what Heizei was thinking. He looked at Gong Yimou and then looked at Heizei. Suddenly, he changed his mind. Anyway, he wanted to deal with this man. Since he was so eager to court death, then he would give it a try. Bring me a mirror. Baichio straightened his body and said to Gong Yimou in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Gong Yimou casually pointed at a frightened maidservant. You, bring me a mirror. That maidservant quickly followed the order. Because it was in the backyard, the mirror was quickly brought back. Gong Yimou simply let the maidservant hold the mirror and stand in front of Baichio. Baichio really used the sharp dagger to shave himself. During the waiting process, Gong Yimou was somewhat bored and kicked Heizei. Tell me, how do you want me to deal with you? Heizei was shocked. He looked at Baichio and said loudly, Princess, all of this was Baichio's own idea. He used this method to please me. It was not good for me to not give him face, so I accepted those beauties. This courtyard was also left behind by the previous governor. I was completely unaware of it. Gong Yimou looked at him kneeling on the ground and spoke with a sincere expression. She said absent-mindedly. In other words, you're innocent. Yes, yes. He nodded his head like he was pounding garlic. Gong Yimou smiled and pointed at the naked people on the ground. Then you're also innocent when you let them besiege me? Heizei was shocked. Just when he wanted to say something, Gong Yimou impatiently interrupted him. All right, it doesn't matter even if you're innocent. If you don't look as good as that Baichio, unfortunately, I will definitely punish you. Gong Yimou had some malicious thoughts. She did not promise that she would let him go if he was better looking than Baichio. When Heizei heard this, he quickly stared at Baichio. At this moment, Baichio seemed to have stopped his actions. The maidservant carried the mirror and retreated, revealing his face. He only heard his deep and cold voice say, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. When Heizei saw his face, he suddenly became angry. Impossible, it was impossible for Baichio to be so good-looking. Chapter 431. Gong Yimou was also shocked for a moment. Actually, she just wanted to tease this person. Who asked him to have such a disdainful attitude towards women? She didn't expect that not only was he better looking than this Heizei, but he was also better looking by more than just a little. At first glance, Baichio looked like a very serious person. Even though he was good-looking and could be considered young, his slightly furrowed eyebrows and stern handsome face gave people a feeling of maturity. The impatience between his eyebrows made it seem as if someone owed him millions of dollars. At this moment, when he saw Gong Yimou staring at him, his brows furrowed even tighter. It was as if being stared at by a woman was something that he couldn't accept. It was really an interesting and awkward personality. On the other side, Heizei couldn't stay calm anymore. He stood up and pointed at Baichio and shouted unwillingly. This is impossible. This is impossible. Baichio was obviously a bearded man. How could he be better than him? Gong Yimou was amused by Heizei's reaction. She narrowed her eyes and looked at him with some pity. She played the role of a lustful and absurd princess incisively and vividly. It seems that the result is very obvious. Lord He, right? I can only deal with you first. Heizei was still resisting. He looked at Gong Yimou plaintively. Princess, this Baichio is a boorish man. Even if his appearance is better than mine, I guarantee that in bed, he won't be as considerate and gentle as me. Gong Yimou was eating pastries. She didn't have much reaction when she heard that. She glanced at him from head to toe. That gaze of hers was like looking at goods. Good skills. That's possible. It's just that your expression is superficial. One look and I can tell that your body has been hollowed out by wine and women. I feel that your ability might be lacking. At this moment, Baichio couldn't listen to it anymore. He stood up and looked coldly at Gong Yimo. You're simply shameless. Could it be that this woman saw that he was handsome and wanted him to be her boy toy? On the other side, Heizei quickly said, I have enough ability, enough. Please give me a chance. Please spare me. Gong Yimo touched her chin. Forget about the chance. I can spare you, but, Heizei looked at her with a face full of surprise. But you should go back to the capital now. Zhao City doesn't belong to you anymore. What? Heizei stood rooted to the ground in shock. It took him a while to find his voice. No. You're just a princess. You have no right. Gong Yimo took out the gold medal and shook it. Back then, Gong Dai had returned the gold medal to her after taking it back from Shinshiryi. She didn't expect it to be so handy. As if I'm here in person. I don't have this right, but does Imperial Father not? Gong Yimo said faintly, you also know the relationship between Gong Dai and me. You also know that your father makes a living under Gong Dai. I'm just removing your position. If you're unhappy and want to make a scene, ask your father to look for Gong Dai and let Gong Dai reason with me. But at that time, he would definitely be dealt with even more miserably. Gong Yimo looked at him with a smile. As for now, you can get lost. By the way, I heard that you have a private advisor with the surname Zhua. Seems like he's your confidant. Take him and scram back. This doesn't make sense. Heizei's brain had completely shut down. Who could tell him if a princess really had such great power to remove him from his position? But Gong Yimo was already impatient. Are you leaving or not? If you're not leaving, do you want me to make a move? Heizei seemed to have just woken up from a dream. Leave. Leave, I'll leave right now. As he said that, he made up his mind. He would bring his confidant back and ask his father to seek justice for him. He also wanted to lodge a complaint against her for abusing her power and interfering in political affairs. He didn't believe that the emperor would allow a princess to cause trouble like this. Seeing that Heizei really left, Baichio still couldn't react. He had been in Zhao City for a year and spent so much effort to gain Heizei's trust. He finally thought of a plan to get rid of Heizei and the He family completely. He didn't expect that this unreasonable princess would mess things up so quickly. At that moment, Baichio's heart was empty. He was annoyed that Gong Yimo was meddling in other people's business, but he couldn't do anything about it. After Gong Yimo dealt with Heizei, she looked at the person who was pretending to be dead on the ground. She got up and went to the front yard. When she passed by Baichio, she smiled maliciously at him. Baichio, right? Come with me. When she smiled, Baichio felt that she had bad intentions towards him. He was originally wary of her, but in an instant, it turned into disgust. Disgust was disgust, but the situation was pressing. Baichio still followed Gong Yimo to the front yard. When they arrived at a place that looked like a study, the servants in the yard were afraid of Gong Yimo and stayed far away. Gong Yimo didn't care and strode in. Baichio hesitated for a moment but still went in. He wanted to see what this woman had up her sleeve. When he went in, Gong Yimo waved her hand and the door behind him was slammed shut. Baichio was shocked and quickly turned to open the door to leave. Gong Yimo laughed behind him. You're a man. Are you afraid that I'll rape you? Can you not be so cowardly? The word cowardly made Baichio's hand that was holding the door handle tightened. In the end, he suppressed his anger and turned around. He looked at Gong Yimo and said coldly, "What orders does the princess have?" Gong Yimo sat on the hollow wooden chair made of yellow rosewood. She put her feet on the desk and said casually, "I've dealt with him, but I haven't dealt with you yet. You snatched a woman on the street. Do you think that this matter will be settled just like that?" Bai Chio said, "What does the princess want?" Gong Yimo couldn't help but tease him when she saw his defensive appearance. "You're using your body to pay for your crime. Shameless." Bai Chio did not hesitate to reply to her with 4 words. Gong Yimo touched her nose and was a little embarrassed. Actually, she was just bored. This Bai Chio snatched a woman and didn't repent. She definitely wanted to torture him. However, seeing that he had the heart to get rid of evil for the people, she didn't mind giving him a chance to listen to the reason. If this Bai Chio wasn't a good person and harmed Bai Zhe for his own selfish reasons, she didn't mind getting rid of evil again. "Tell me, why do you want to harm Bai Zhe? Do you want to replace him?" Bai Chio sneered. He was tall and stood there like a big tree. He looked at Gong Yimo with disdain. At this moment, he had already determined that Gong Yimo was a perverted person. Of course, he didn't have a good tone. Just a governor of Zhaoqing. I don't care. What he yearned for was to fight on the battlefield and serve the country. He didn't want to fight and scheme in this small border town. Such big words. Gong Yimo laughed, "You're just a city guard leader. What's there to be arrogant about? Tell me, what grudge do you have with He Zhe? Why did you scheme to harm him? I'll give you a chance. You better tell me the truth." Chapter 432. Bai Chio didn't want to say it at first, but Gong Yimo was someone with power and influence. If she really wanted to get to the bottom of it, he wouldn't be able to hide it from her. After a long silence, Bai Chio finally spoke. "I just can't stand the He family and wanted to help my father get rid of a pest in Zhao City." "What do you mean? Who's your father?" Gong Yimo's interest was piqued. "You better tell me the truth, otherwise, when I make my move, there will be 2 possible outcomes for you." She was threatening him again. Bai Chio clenched his fists and frowned. He said coldly, "No need to threaten me, I'll tell you." He took a deep breath. "I, Bai Chio, am the son of Bai Ji, the garrison general of the border city." Gong Yimo was stunned. She asked curiously, "The Bai Ji you're talking about, is he the 3rd-rank general guarding the border city?" Bai Chio found it hard to speak, but in the end, he said, "Yes." He looked at the desk and seemed to recall the past. His expression was conflicted. "Back then, I was very young, my father was just a small soldier. It was tough living in a place like Zhao City. The woman who gave birth to me was very beautiful. In the end, she didn't want to suffer with my father, so she seduced the former governor of Zhao City and became his concubine. Since the former governor didn't have a son, she took me with her. After my father came back, he went to find trouble with the former governor in a fit of anger. In the end, he was seriously injured and couldn't even take me with him. In the end, he was disheartened and went back to the border city. It's also that woman's fault for being as blind as a bat. Later on, my father made great contributions and was promoted very quickly. That woman regretted following an old governor and went to the border to find my father. My father was originally unwilling to accept her, but for my sake, he agreed. But I didn't expect that all of this was a conspiracy by that rank 2 official He Axein. When he talked about his mother, his tone was disgusted. He kept using that woman as a metaphor. When he talked about He Axein, it was pure hatred. He Axein is a 2nd-rank official and a close official in the capital. I don't know how that woman got together with He Axein. Anyway, He Axein wanted to get rid of my father, who had no foundation, for his son who would be the future governor of Zhao City. This way, not only will his son become the governor of Zhao City, but he will also be able to obtain the 50,000 soldiers that were originally stationed in Zhao City. Speaking of this, he smiled bitterly. I don't know what he Axian promised that woman, but she actually used me to secretly poison father. Later, the conspiracy fell apart. Although father didn't die, he became a mute. Father wanted to kill her, but she was taken away by He Axian and brought to the capital. Now, it's said that the first wife is dead and she has been promoted to the first wife. Father was disheartened by that incident and never smiled again. Moreover, after He Zhe took over, he was unwilling to deal with such rascals and directly left Zhao City to repair the border. However, because he was poisoned into a mute, even though the emperor pitied his father for his hard work, he would never have the chance to be promoted again. You will be a loyal subject for the rest of your life. And all of this was caused by the child that he was so proud of. Bai Qiu said fiercely, Father can swallow this, but I can't. So, I sneaked into He Zhe's side and saw that he was an ignorant and incompetent child, so I wanted to use him to turn the He family upside down. I was about to succeed, but I didn't expect you to interfere. Speaking of this, he finally showed his resentment and looked angry. So, not only did he want He Zhe to lose the governor's position, but he also wanted to bring disaster to the entire He family. No, perhaps this wasn't the main point. His main point was probably that he hoped that Bai Ji could return to Zhao City and not have to work so hard in the border fortress. Gong Yimo touched her chin and said innocently, I didn't know. You wanted to catch me, so how can you blame me? If not. Bai Qiu still stubbornly asked. Gong Emo shrugged her shoulders. Forget it, she was a great person who didn't hold a grudge against a villain. This was because she knew Bai Qiu's father, Bai Ji, in her previous life. In her previous life, his father helped her, but she didn't know that he had a child. No matter what, the matter here is finished. Father will send a new governor over soon. Shouldn't you go back? Bai Qiu's face showed his reluctance. Why, you don't want to go back to your father? Bai Qiu looked at her and said in a low voice after a while, I was young and inexperienced, so I begged father to forgive that woman. But later on, that woman used me to poison father. Even if father didn't say anything in the end and endured it, he wouldn't blame me, but he couldn't endure it. Moreover, he swore that if he couldn't make the He family pay the price and make his father return to Zhao City, he wouldn't go back. So, he was a homeless child. Gong Yimo thought of the 50,000 soldiers stationed outside Zhao City and stared at Bai Qiu. Suddenly, she had an idea. Since that's the case, you can follow me. I just happen to lack a waiter. Of course, Bai Qiu wouldn't agree. Dream on. So what if you're a princess? I, Bai Qiu, will not be a woman's servant. Gong Yimo tilted her head. Did you forget something? Only you can kidnap women, but I can't kidnap men. What should I do? Your crime is not small. If Bai Ji knew that you harmed so many women in order to gain He Zhe's trust, he would be very sad. As she spoke, she waved the gold medal in her hand. Moreover, father said that my status is equivalent to the crown prince. If you don't satisfy me, I can only vent my anger on your father. Your father is so pitiful. He couldn't get promoted because of a woman, and lost his position because of his own son. Are you threatening me? For the first time, Bai Qiu hated a woman so much. Gong Yimo said frankly, yes, I'm threatening you. If you don't follow me, I can't guarantee what I will do when I see your father after we pass the checkpoint. The emperor won't allow you to do that. Gong Yimo said indifferently. Whatever. At most, he'll scold me. But it's hard to say if your father will be reinstated, Gong Yimo. I didn't expect you to know my name. Why me? Bai Qiu asked in annoyance. Wasn't his disgust obvious enough? He still had so many things to do. Who knew if that Heizei would come back again? Gong Yimou touched her chin and smiled. You're good looking. Bai Qiu, I'm going to scratch this face. Gong Yimou waved her hand. Don't worry. I've seen many beauties in the palace. Gong Dai is even better than you. I'm used to eating big fish and big meat. I won't be interested in a small vegetable porridge like you. Bai Qiu, who knows if she wants to change her taste. Anyway, under Gong Yimou's strong request, Bai Qiu finally became her waiter. Gong Yimou sent a letter to Gong Dai, asking him to ask father to send another trustworthy governor. Then, she listened to Bai Qiu and temporarily appointed someone to take care of the affairs. Then, she continued with Bai Qiu. Chapter 433. Gong Yimou did not intend to care about the matters in Zhao City. She had already given money to appease those women. Those who had families could go home, and those who did not could wait for the next governor to make arrangements. Anyway, she believed that as long as Gong Dai took this matter seriously, he would definitely do a good job. However, as long as it was something Gong Yimou said, which matter had Gong Dai not taken to heart. Bai Qiu was a little unhappy along the way, especially when they were about to reach the garrison's boundary. In the past 10 years, the garrison and Zhao City had been completely separated. They did not interfere with each other. Now that he had accomplished nothing, he really did not want to go back. However, Gong Yimou did not care. She kept ordering him around. Anyway, he had done something bad, so she did not feel guilty at all when she ordered him around. At night, the two of them rested on the grass. Gong Yimou's standard of barbecuing was really quite low. She could not help but miss Gong Dai's cooking. Since she was young, Gong Dai's cooking was as if he was born to be good. It was especially to her taste. However, now that Gong Dai was not around, she could only put up with it. However, her expression was as if she had eaten poison, which seriously provoked Bai Qiu. He could not wait to just leave. He really did not want to tolerate her. Seeing his ugly expression, Gong Yimou sighed. Bai Qiu, your cooking is really amazing. She scratched her heart and lungs to think of an adjective that was not derogatory. At that moment, Bai Qiu decided that he would definitely practice a superb cooking skill in the future to broaden this woman's horizons. After a while, Gong Yimou was bored and started ordering him around again. Although he had been gritting his teeth, he had never once disobeyed her. Therefore, Gong Yimou was even more energetic. If she wanted to drink water, he would go get it. If she wanted to rest, he would clean up and cook. However, if she could not sleep at night, it was too much to ask him to tell her a bedtime story. Bai Qiu smashed the water bottle in his hand. He was not doing it. Gong Yimou did not look at him. She just looked at the sky and sighed faintly. What should I do? I can't sleep if I don't hear a bedtime story. If I can't sleep, I will be in a bad mood. I'm going to see Bai Ji tomorrow. Do you think I should vent my anger on him? Bai Qiu stopped breathing deeply. His tall figure resolutely turned around and returned to the side of the fire again. What do you want to hear? His face was so dark that it could cure a child. But to see your father. In fact, very few people knew that Bai Ji had a son. After all, he had lived with his mother for a long time when he was young. But no matter what, Bai Ji treated him well and had high hopes for him. Then be quiet, he said angrily. Gong Yimou slept beside the fire. She put her hand behind her head and looked at the stars in the sky. Okay, I'll shut up. You tell me. Bai Qiu took a deep breath and racked his brains. In the end, he told her a story about a butcher and a wolf. The general idea was that the butcher went home at night and met a wolf. The butcher was afraid that the wolf would attack him, so he held the butcher's knife in his hand and threw the bones in his pole to the wolf, hoping that the wolf would eat the meat and leave quickly. The original ending of the story was that the wolf was not satisfied, so the butcher planned to kill the wolf. But Baichio did not know why. The ending of the story was, the butcher was fooled by the wolf's illusion that it was full. He kept the butcher's knife in his hand and was bitten to death by the wolf. Gong Yimo frowned. This story is not logical. Under normal circumstances, the butcher fed the wolf so much meat and bones. The wolf was full and would not be so aggressive. Even if the butcher was relieved, he should not have kept the butcher's knife in his hand. Baichio glared at her. It was a story, why did it need logic? He sneered. There are such stupid butchers in this world. They did not guard against the wolf and thought that the wolf would be full. They did not know that the wolf was greedy and would never be satisfied. Even if the wolf killed a person, it would not finish the person after achieving its goal. At most, it was an instinct to conquer the enemy that was a threat to itself. If a person believed in the wolf, only death would await them. Gong Yimo knew what he meant. He was saying that his father should not have trusted his mother so easily and was harmed by his mother. But Gong Yimo. She could not help but think of a pair of cold star-like eyes. She was not convinced. There are wolves that can be tamed. What the wolf becomes in the end, the environment it grew up in is the absolute reason. People say that it is easy to change mountains and rivers, but it is hard to change one's nature. I think that nature is the easiest to change. It will change with time, status, and experience. It cannot be generalized. Baichio looked at her with a puzzled expression. Why are you so agitated? Do you want to be that stupid butcher too? He sneered, but when he saw that Gong Yimo did not say anything, he could not help but put on a serious face and said coldly. There is a saying in the book, at the beginning of man, his nature is good. I think that at the beginning of man, there is good and evil. The nature of evil, no matter how the environment changes, it will not defecate. Maybe it will hide its nature, but once the bottom line is crossed, it will definitely show its fangs. It is like someone once raised a wolf. It was raised since it was young, but it did not feed it for a day and it killed the child in the family. So, evil is evil. The nature of evil did not break out. Maybe it is because it has not been forced to a dead end, or it has not gotten what it wants, so it pretends to be harmless. Nonsense. Gong Yimo was panting with anger. She thought of Gong Dai and felt that although Gong Dai was cold-blooded and cruel in her previous life, he was much better in this life. In her previous life, although he killed her, he would not do it in this life. But, what if it was just because she didn't touch his interests, didn't stand on the opposite side of him, so he wasn't forced into a dead end, or he hadn't conquered her yet, so he didn't show his fangs. Gong Yimo was bewitched. Once bitten, twice shy. The last painful memory of her previous life overlapped with the memory now. One moment, it was Gong Dai's cruel and evil smile, the next moment, it was Gong Dai's clear eyes. They were obviously the same person, but would they really become two completely different people? Scary. What was she thinking? Gong Yimo knocked on her head. She had already given her virginity to Gong Dai. Thinking of this, she glared at Baichio angrily. Just you wait, I will prove to you that there is no such thing as nature. Even if it is a wolf, it will become a good wolf. Baichio was baffled and simply did not want to bother with her. Gong Yimo turned over on the grass and made up her mind. Tomorrow, she would go to see Baiji. She wanted to use Baichio as a favor to get Baiji's support. Most importantly, she did not want to see this annoying person Baichio ever again. Chapter 434. Late at night, Prince Chi's residence was on fire. Gong Dai watched the flames rise. Especially in summer, the fire was unstoppable. It burned down 1/5 of the rooms, including the room where the royal sister used to live. His face was extremely gloomy as he watched the imperial army go in and out to put out the fire. He stood at the edge of the fire, his face red and the depths of his eyes red. "Your Highness." Lo Chi knelt beside him. The person who set the fire was caught and killed himself with poison. At this moment, Luo Xiaoqi also knelt down. Reporting. "Your Highness, many people have written to impeach you and urge the Emperor to take back your authority over the Imperial Army. Should we intercept them?" Reporting, "Your Highness. A spy has appeared in the Imperial Army camp and caused internal strife. Should we execute him on the spot?" Reporting, "Your Highness, the fire has been dug out. The fire won't spread any further." The fire was still raging. Even though they were kneeling there, they found it difficult to breathe, and their faces were burning. Gong Ju's expression remained unchanged. He listened to the reports one after another, and coldly said, "Order everyone to come here and save this room." "What about the other rooms?" The prince's study was also on fire. Back then, in order to accompany the princess, the prince had deliberately moved to this corner and did not move away. The study was an important place. Did they not need to save it? Gong Dai closed his eyes to hide the hostility in them and said coldly, "Let it burn." Lo Chi was nudged by Xiaoqi and stepped forward. "Your Highness, putting out the fire is not the most important thing right now. There are still many people waiting for your orders." Gong Dai glanced at them. "What did you just say?" Everyone wanted to faint. But they had no choice but to grit their teeth and repeat it. Gong Dai's gaze moved away from the room where the royal sister used to live and fell on them. "This prince knows the person who set the fire. There's no need to investigate. There's also no need to stop those who impeach this prince. Let them impeach. If possible, let our people impeach this prince as well. As for the imperial army, this prince has his own arrangements. There's no need to worry." Lo Chi did not understand why their own people were also impeaching the prince. But he did not ask. He only gnashed his teeth and said, "Those impeachers usually received a lot of benefits from us, but now they changed sides." Gong Dai was silent. This was within his expectations. After all, except for his trusted officials, he had only used money to rope in the court officials. Because he had sworn that he would not become emperor, then it would be fine if he did not clash with the crown prince. Once he broke off relations with the crown prince, would those people help the future emperor or a prince who had sworn not to become emperor? Anyone could tell the difference between the pros and cons. "Your Highness, since the crown prince is already bullying us, how should we fight back?" According to the thoughts of the servants and the prince's usual style, he felt that if the prince made a move, the crown prince would definitely lose miserably. Unexpectedly, Gong Ju just shook his head. "Wait a little longer." "Wait for what?" someone asked subconsciously. Gong Dai watched as the fire gradually died down. His expression softened. "Wait for the emperor's decision." He was afraid that if he stayed in the capital, he would wash the land with blood. Seeing that Gong Dai did not move, they all felt aggrieved. Lo Chi frowned. "I don't know why the crown prince suddenly went crazy. He has been causing trouble for us recently. A few days ago, the riot in Zhao prison must have had something to do with the crown prince. What does he want to do?" "That's right. He also took all the money from the bank. Because of this, many large orders were taken away. The bank suffered a great loss." Little Chi said angrily. Gong Dai actually smiled with a trace of pride in his eyes. You're right. HM. He really has gone crazy. While Gong Dai was busy putting out the fire, the people in the palace were also anxious. The ground was covered with tossed memorials and documents. The emperor sat on the dragon throne with his hands on his forehead. He was indescribably tired. Changshi hurriedly drove out all the palace servants who were kneeling down below and advised earnestly. Your Majesty, your health is more important, haha. Emperor Qing, who was rubbing his head, let out a deep laugh. It echoed in the hall in the middle of the night, making one's hair stand on end. Gong Che is really amazing when he doesn't make a move. Emperor Qing sneered. He unscrupulously provoked Gong Dai. First, he knew that Gong Dai would listen to and not counterattack. Second, even if he counterattacked, Gong Che would be happy to fight with Gong Dai. Good. Very good, a mountain can't have two tigers. It's natural for them to fight. Changshi's old face wrinkled. Your Majesty, the two princes, will know what to do. Emperor Cheng's voice suddenly rose. Gong Che's withdrawal of funds has already made the people panic. The imperial army is fighting among themselves. Tonight, the Wangfu is on fire. What's the next step? I'm afraid they're going to fight openly. At this time, a little eunuch came to deliver memorials overnight. Changshi glanced at them and didn't want to hand them over. But Emperor Qing had already snatched them and read several of them. He was so angry that his face turned blue and his laughter became colder. Good. There are so many impeachment documents. I'm afraid there will be more tomorrow morning. This is already a fight. Changshi held the booklet in his hand as if he was holding a hot potato. The two princes quarreled like fire and water. The entire Zhaoyang Hall was like adding oil to a raging fire, about to burn at any moment. At this time, he missed the princess very much. If only the princess was here. If she was here, this kind of thing would absolutely not happen. At this time, Emperor Qing also calmed down a little after throwing a tantrum. He really couldn't intervene in this matter. Now, Gong Che was only looking for Gong Dai to vent his anger. If he intervened, the situation would only be worse. It was even more impossible to stop Gong Dai from fighting back. Once he suppressed Gong Dai too much and Gong Dai resisted, it would be a fight to the death. He still remembered Gong Dai's words to him, Imperial Father, you should thank Royal Sister. Without her, the entire imperial family would be my enemy. Now, as long as he thought of this sentence, he felt a chill down his spine. He was afraid that Gong Dai would also go crazy. Your Majesty, what should we do now? Changshi felt that this matter must be resolved before Prince Qi counterattacked. After a long while, Emperor Qing faintly said. Didn't Gong Dai say that he's going to build the highway? Let him go. But Changshi was at a loss. But don't you still want Prince Qi to get married as soon as possible? Once he goes out of the country, the sky is high and the sea is wide, difficult to control. What else can we do? After Emperor Qing said this, he seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. In his heart, he knew very well that Gong Ju hadn't fought back until now because he had refused Gong Ju's request to leave the capital a few days ago. But now, the situation forced Gong Ju to make a concession. He was afraid that this was exactly what Gong Ju wanted. Chapter 435. Eastern Palace. Gong Che was sitting in the study, reading a book with a smile on his face. He seemed to be in a good mood. At this time, someone knocked on the door. In the silent night, there was an indescribable chill. Come in. Gong Che lazily said without even raising his head. In the Eastern Palace, everyone was his people, so they came and went alone without any defenses. When the person came in, the fragrance of cosmetics lingered around his nose, causing him to frown for no reason. As a result, when he looked up, he saw Su Miaolon wearing only a thin gauze dress. His gaze was subtle. Su Miaolon had thrown caution to the wind. She thought that the day of her wedding was already the greatest humiliation she had ever suffered in her life. But she didn't expect that the worst was yet to come. The crown prince wouldn't touch her at all. For this reason, she had thought of every method and tried every trick, but the crown prince was still cold and indifferent. Although he didn't embezzle her food and clothing, nor did he interfere with her rights as the crown princess, she was very clear that as long as she wasn't the crown princess woman, her position as the crown princess existed in name only. There was a possibility that she could be replaced at any time. The summer night was still a bit cold, especially when she was only wearing a gauze dress. When Gong Chei's smiling gaze fell on her body, she shivered for no reason. She didn't understand why. But in any case, she didn't forget the reason why she was here, so she gathered her courage and took a step forward. "Your Highness, it's already so late. How about this concubine help you rest?" Her voice was seductive, but when it echoed in the cold study, it trembled slightly. Gong Chei held a book in his hand and sat upright. One could see that his bearing was excellent, and his aura was even stronger than before. At this time, he quietly looked at Su Miaolon with a gentle expression. But Su Miaolon's body stiffened, and she couldn't speak for a long time. "Are you here to seduce me? Is the crown prince's residence not treating you well? So much so that you want a yard after taking an inch?" Su Miaolon was shocked. She repeatedly shook her head. "No, no, no. The crown prince is very good to this concubine. It's just that," she lowered her head, "it's just that this concubine is still the crown prince's wife. Now, I just want to fulfill my duties as a wife." Gong Chei suddenly smiled. His smile was like a spring breeze, with an indescribable warmth. "If it was Immerse, if she was my wife, she would have walked over to seduce me." His tone was so tender and affectionate, as if he was looking forward to that scene. However, this sudden sentence caused Su Miaolon's face to turn deathly pale. She clenched her teeth tightly, her veiled body trembling with anger. What could be more humiliating than her husband comparing her to another woman when she was seducing him? However, Gong Chei still underestimated the thickness of Su Miaolon's skin. She approached Gong Chei step by step, her delicate body slightly trembling. That gauze dress simply couldn't cover anything. Her figure was completely exposed in the man's line of sight, and a smile once again appeared on her face. "Your Highness, why don't you give it a try? As long as you try once, you will know that this concubine is much stronger than that Gong Yimo." She said the last few words with gritted teeth. The smile on her face had stiffened, but her body was as relaxed as possible. Her thoughts were somewhat reasonable. Gong Chei had never been close to women, so how could he know the beauty of women? As long as he tried once, she guaranteed that he would never forget it again. As long as she was given a chance. She stuck out her chest, and her charming body became even more alluring. She was almost 20 years old, and her body was mature. She didn't believe that Gong Chei wouldn't be captivated after trying once. Just once. With this thought, she gathered her courage and threw herself at Gong Chei, but she was blocked by Gong Chei's book. He sat down, and she lowered her head. At that moment, she clearly saw Gong Chei's eyes, and the coldness that could freeze 1,000 miles. "Don't compare yourself to Immerse," he chuckled, and his lowered voice sounded like a ghost. "In this concubine's eyes, you can't even compare to a single strand of her hair." Su Miaolon could no longer maintain her smile, and her face began to burn with pain. Gong Chei, on the other hand, was very interested. He stood up and looked at the woman in front of him, who was trying her best to marry him. Seeing this, Su Miaolon's anger froze, and she wished she could run away. Before, she didn't feel it because Gong Che had been smiling. But now, his smile gradually froze, causing Su Miaolon to feel fear. The crown prince in front of her was no longer the gentle, jade-like crown prince. He was clearly fine before, but at this moment, his terrifying appearance on the day of the wedding appeared once again. Su Miaolon stood there, her voice seemingly frozen, and her body was drenched in cold sweat. Crown Prince. I am your wife. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her body kept retreating. He had treated her with courtesy after their marriage, but that didn't mean that she had the capital to take a mile after taking an inch. Gong Che used the book to lift her chin, and carefully looked at her. What should I do? You and Immerse don't look alike at all. Looking at you, this concubine has no desire. At that moment, Su Miaolon was so ashamed that she wanted to die. But before she could resist, Gong Che's gaze gradually froze. An invisible murderous aura caused her to freeze like a frightened cat. This concubine told you before that if you wanted to marry this concubine would give you the honor of being the crown prince's concubine. But that's all. But his bloodthirsty gaze fell on Su Miaolon's exposed neck, and his deep voice seemed to come from the netherworld. But if you want to take a mile after taking an inch, this crown prince's residence can give you honor, but it can also make you die without a burial place. After saying this, Gong Che walked away, not caring about Su Miaolon's life or death. He left for a long time before Su Miaolon finally dared to breathe heavily. She supported herself on the chair in front of her with both hands, and looked at the open door with resentment. Her heart was filled with hatred. Why was Gong Yimo everywhere? Why did Gong Yimo want to harm her like this? If Gong Yimo didn't exist, the crown prince would absolutely not hate her so much. When she was young, a master had said that she had the fate of the phoenix. But all of this was destroyed by Gong Yimo. But hatred was hatred, resentment was resentment. Gong Che's cold words just now still lingered in her ears, so she didn't dare to do anything. On Gong Yimo's side, the two of them were lying on a hillside, looking forward. Below the hillside, rows of soldiers were patrolling around, and the security was tight. But under the night sky, they didn't notice two people peeping on the hillside. Don't you feel that the atmosphere in the campsite is a bit strange? Gong Yimo asked softly. Bai Chio frowned and observed, it seems to be martial law. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but worry. Why was it martial law? Did something happen to father? Gong Yimo was a bit distressed. If only she could shrink, then she could quietly sneak in and take a look. At this moment, she suddenly exclaimed. Oh no! What's wrong? Bai Chio also became nervous. Gong Yimo said with a bit of a headache, my pet seems to have been left behind by me in Zhao City. Chapter 436. She could only blame the monkey for not having any sense of presence. She only remembered that she had left her package in the governor's residence when she needed it. She did not know if the little monkey had managed to escape. Bai Chio glared at her. She still had the mood to care about her pet at such a time. What should we do now? The guards are so strict that we can't sneak in. Gong Yimo smiled and patted his shoulder like an old man. It's time to show you the difference in our strength. Do you know why you can only be a waiter? Because you are too weak. After saying that, Gong Yimo went down without waiting for Bai Chio's response. Moreover, she really grasped the timing. It was the moment when the two teams crossed each other. She sneaked in like a ghost without alerting anyone. That Qingong was simply amazing. Although Bai Chio was unwilling, he was convinced. This woman's martial arts were much better than his. He did not know if she had been practicing martial arts since she was in her mother's womb. Otherwise, how could she be so powerful? Gong Emo sneaked in, but it wasn't as easy as she appeared to be. If it weren't for the fact that it was night and she was wearing black clothes, she would have been discovered long ago. This camp had 2,000 people on duty in the middle of the night. She didn't know what was happening. Gong Emo swayed left and right and finally reached the largest tent. However, she could not get close to it. The tent was surrounded by guards. Even if she turned into a bird and flew over, she would be shot down. However, it was better to be early than to arrive at the right time. Someone walked out of the main tent and asked anxiously. That person just shook his head and said something. The doctor said it will be in a few days. How could it be so fast? The person who asked looked pained. I'm afraid the document has not reached the capital yet. Young master also did not find it. What should we do? The person who came out of the main tent sighed. It's all that damn assassin's fault. I don't know where he came from. Gong Emo, who was behind him, didn't listen much and quickly retreated. Bai Chio's eyes lit up when he saw her return. How was it? Gong Emo shook her head and asked. Back then, Imperial Father took pity on Bai Ji's loyalty, so he specially allowed Bai Ji to promote himself to the position of general, right? Bai Chio didn't know why she asked that, but he nodded. If father dies, he has the right to choose who the next great general will be. Gong Emo rolled her eyes. Then your father's situation isn't good. Although I didn't go in, I heard a few words. Your father seems to have been assassinated and his life is hanging by a thread. Moreover, they can't find where you are now. They are all worried. How is that possible? Bai Chio was the first to not believe it. Father's martial arts are unparalleled. How can a mere small fry be a match for father? Gong Emo thought more about it. There are assassins, but they might not necessarily be outsiders. She looked at Bai Chio, and her eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of craftiness. I'm sure you can't care so much now. Since that's the case, you can leave and see your father for the last time. Nonsense. His father was fine. This woman must be lying to him. A woman's words can't be trusted. Therefore, he didn't want to wait any longer and directly went down the hill. Soon, he alarmed the patrolling guards and was surrounded. Who is it? The leader shouted. Bai Chio was worried about his father and hurriedly said, I am Bai Ji's son. Please pass the message, I want to see my father. Bai Ji's son. Many people looked at each other in dismay. Because they rarely saw Bai Chio, they didn't believe it. However, someone still went to pass the message. Gong Emo watched from afar, looking forward to the next big show. The person who came wasn't Bai Ji, which made Bai Chio even more worried. Fortunately, he knew this person. He was his father's military advisor. Uncle Lu. Lu Jing came over to take a look and found that it was indeed Bai Chio. He frowned and didn't say anything. Military advisor Lu, this person said that he is General Bai's son. Does General Bai have a son? Why haven't I seen him before? Someone whispered, it seems that he does have a son, but I remember that he is a burly bearded man and not a pretty boy. That's right. He doesn't look like General Bai at all. Military advisor Lu, can you see clearly that he is not an imposter? Bai Chio finally felt that something was wrong. Because Gong Emo didn't come out with him, he could only put his hope on Lu Jing. Although it had been 2 years, Lu Jing still supported him to take revenge. There was no reason that he didn't remember him now. Uncle Lu, I am Chio. However, Lu Jing shook his head, the sky is too dark, and his appearance is very different. Now is an eventful time. Take him into custody first and let the Deputy General identify him tomorrow. When he said that, Baichio was angry. Military advisor Lu, I just shaved my beard and you don't recognize me? You were the one who supported me to take revenge. Lu Jing was a middle-aged man with a white face. At this time, he frowned. I haven't seen Gongzi for 2 years. Who knows if you are an imposter or not? Take him into custody. Yes. Many people came to arrest Baichio. He originally wanted to resist, but the soldiers beside him were all trained by his father. He couldn't bear to do so. So be it. Tomorrow, when he sees the Deputy General Lu, he will see the situation. There was one more thing that he didn't say. Gong Yimou hadn't appeared yet. She obviously expected this scene and deliberately encouraged him to come out to be arrested. Damn it, she must be hiding in the dark to watch the show. He was right. Gong Yimou was watching the show. However, after Baichio was taken away, Lu Jing was still worried. He ordered the patrolling soldiers to search the surroundings, fearing that there were spies and accomplices. In his words, he didn't admit that Baichio was General Bai's son. Gong Yimou raised her eyebrows and gloated. Then, she got up and hid. The next morning, Baichio was awakened by water. When he saw the Deputy General Lu, his eyes lit up. Brother Lu, I am Chio. However, when he saw Lu Jin's cold eyes, Baichio's heart sank. Before seeing Lu Jin, he could still lie to himself that his father was fine, that he had only been assassinated. But now, after seeing Lu Jin, all his hopes had turned into wishful thinking. His father's subordinates had betrayed him. Could his father still be safe? Tell me, who are you? Why are you impersonating General Bai's son? What is your purpose? Baichio frowned and stared at him for a long time. Lu Jin, you pretended not to know me. You are quite good at it. To think that my father trusted you so much. I am Baiji's son. I guarantee it. If you have the guts, let me see my father. Lu Jin sneered, General Bai doesn't have a son. And you are just an imposter assassin. Chapter 437. Lu Jin. You're really heartless. Have you forgotten? If it wasn't for father, you would have been beaten to death by those thugs. Even when father saw how brave he was, he even took him in as his foster son. Baichio's face turned red. He wanted to make a move but he was suppressed by others. Moreover, he noticed that there were many people in this camp who were secretly colluding with Lu Jin. This indicated that father's situation was even more dangerous. Lu Jin was much more ruthless than Baichio imagined. He looked at Baichio who was unwilling to accept his fate and laughed. This person pretended to be General Bai's son. His intentions are sinister. It's better to execute him directly. He said the word execute so easily, completely disregarding their childhood friendship. The subordinate asked, flogging or beheading? No. Lu Jin looked at Baichio condescendingly, cut his face, cut the tendons in his arms and legs, then throw him out to feed the wolves. Baichio looked up in shock. He didn't expect this person who always took care of him like a big brother would be so vicious. Lu Jin bent down and looked at him. He whispered, are you unwilling to accept this? Do you want to kill me very much? What a pity. Baiji was smart all his life but he gave birth to such a stupid son. But it's okay. I will wipe away this stain for my foster father soon. Lu Jin. I will let you go even if I become a ghost. Just when someone handed a knife to Lu Jin slowly picked up a knife. His gaze stopped on Baichio's face as if he was thinking of where to start. At this moment, a person quickly ran in. Not good, Deputy General. Lu Jin hated the word deputy but still said in a deep voice, what's the matter? That person said loudly, the princess is here. Bai Qiu was slightly stunned. Only then did Lu Jin's look turn solemn, Princess Gugua. Yes. Damn it. Lu Jin cursed, how did she come so fast? Why didn't there any news from Zhao City? That person was just about to say this. There's news from Zhao City. It said that the idiot from He family was killed by the princess a few days ago. Lu Jin frowned. At this moment, he thought of something and suddenly questioned Bai Qiu. Wait, aren't you in Zhao City? You suddenly came back. Have you seen the princess? What princess? I don't know. Bai Qiu sneered, why, are you scared now? What were you doing earlier? If you know what's good for you, then quickly release my father. Killing intent flashed in Lu Jin's eyes. He walked closer to Bai Qiu. Suddenly, he bent down and slashed his face. I'll deal with you later. Let's go. After Lu Jin left, Bai Qiu covered his face with one hand. He was suddenly worried. No matter what, Gong Yimo was a woman. Even if she was strong in martial arts, she wouldn't be at a disadvantage when facing a ruthless person like Lu Jin, right? Thinking of this, he felt a little conflicted. He was afraid that he would implicate Gong Yimo. He could only say that he did not understand Gong Yimo at all. At this time, Gong Yimo was wearing a complicated palace dress and a jade ornament on her head. Just by sitting there, even if she did not do anything, she gave people a feeling of being honored. Even if she did not bring any attendants, no one would suspect that she was not a princess. When Lu Jin came in, he saw the princess sitting and drinking tea. An undercurrent flashed in his eyes as he respectfully walked in. Dragon City Camp's Lu Jin greets the princess. He kneeled on the ground and saluted, I didn't know the princess was coming. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. Gong Yimo knocked on the lid of the bowl, making a crisp sound. She then looked down at the person at her feet. She did not call him to stand up and only said, this princess is a little unhappy. Her voice was like a pearl. Just by listening to it, Lu Jin felt his blood rushing to his head. He could not help but raise his head and lowered his voice by 8 degrees. What is the princess worried about? Tell me, this official is willing to solve the princess's worries. Gong Yimo said with grievance. This princess's pet is missing. He disappeared in this place. This princess wants to find him. Lu Jin quickly said, I don't know what the princess's pet looks like. This official will send someone to find him. Gong Yimo tapped her lips with her jade finger and said, his looks are passable. His brain is also normal. It's just that he is a little impulsive and a little conceited. At this moment, Lu Jin finally felt that something was wrong. She did not say that he was an animal, but Bai Qiu. Gong Yimo smiled and looked at him. Originally, this princess wanted to directly pass through the border and go to Yuqi. But now that the pet is missing, this princess wants to find Bai Ji to ask for an explanation. Lu Jin's expression became worse and worse. Gong Yimo said again. General Lu, right? This princess will give you 2 choices. 1. This princess wants to see Bai Ji. 2. This princess wants to get back her pet, Bai Qiu. As expected, her premonition came true. Lu Jin suddenly looked at Gong Yimo gloomily and stood up. He was close to 2 meters tall, like an iron tower looming in front of her, causing Gong Yimo to raise her eyebrows slightly. She sat there and looked at him calmly. You seem to have a problem with this princess's request. Lu Jin smiled. I don't dare. I believe that princess already knows about General Bai's illness. Gong Yimo nodded. Lu Jin said, it just so happens that this humble subject also knows that princess came here alone. And now, the 50,000 people in the Dragon City camp all listened to this humble subject's orders. So, Gong Yimo smiled, like a fox charming people, causing Lu Jin's originally cold voice to soften a little. So, this humble subject advises Princess to come out of seclusion as soon as possible. The Dragon City camp does not have much to do with Princess's interests. On the contrary, if the Dragon City camp stays in this humble subject's hands, it will be a good thing for Princess. That Bai Ji is a boorish man who is inflexible and does not know how to be flexible. But this humble subject is different. As long as Princess turns a blind eye, this humble subject will be at your beck and call if Princess needs anything in Yuchi in the future. This humble subject will definitely not be worse than Bai Ji and his son. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes slightly and said slowly. You are smart. He knew the real reason why she brought Bai Chio along. Lu Jin smiled, this humble subject's brain is still good. But in this humble subject's opinion, Princess is the real smart person. Regarding the pros and cons, I believe Princess will make the right decision, right? Gong Yimo thought for a while. Your proposal is very tempting. Speaking of which, this princess does not care who is in charge of the Dragon City camp, but you must return Bai Chio to this princess. Why? Lu Jin frowned, somewhat puzzled. Gong Yimo blinked and said somewhat embarrassedly, Bai Chio is young and handsome. After this princess has him, this is the time when I want to have him. I can leave this place, but this princess really can't leave Bai Chio. Lu Jin saw her yearning look and his Adam's apple moved. This humble subject is not worse than Bai Chio, princess. Gong Yimo shook her head and said faintly, if you want to mind your own business, this is the bottom line. Chapter 438. Her unyielding attitude made Lu Jin ponder deeply. He thought, was this princess really blinded by lust, or was she just stalling for time? She wanted to save Bai Chio. But it didn't make sense, according to the time, even if she and Bai Chio knew each other, it was only a few days. It was impossible for them to have deep feelings for each other. She wouldn't risk her life for someone she only knew for a few days. This was not in line with her interests, so he still believed that this princess really liked Bai Chio and treated him as a boy toy. She even wanted to bring him to Yuchi and enjoy him along the way. But, he couldn't agree to it. He said regretfully. Princess, you're late. Last night, this subject caught him. To prevent people from being unsettled, this subject has already disfigured his face. I'm afraid that Princess will lose your appetite if you see it. Gong Yimo suddenly became furious. What do you mean? Bai Chio is the man that this consort has been doting on recently. You actually dare to disfigure his face. She really played the role of a lecherous princess so well that Lu Jin believed her a little more. Princess, there are many handsome men. Even if you don't like this subject, you can still find one in the camp. There will definitely be someone who looks better than Bai Chio. But it was a pity that she didn't like him. But he was still very interested in her body. Gong Yimo pouted, it's fine. This consort has medicine in her hands. Bring this consort to see how it's ruined. Lu Jin saw that she still didn't relent and frowned, he's just a boy toy. His face is already gone. Why is Princess still thinking about him? Gong Yimo rolled her eyes and glanced at him, what do you know? Do I need to tell you about the beauty of it? Lu Jin's body went limp from her gaze. Gong Yimo shouted, quickly bring me there. He thought for a while and agreed. Anyway, there were more than 50,000 people in this camp. So what if she was the princess? She came to his territory alone. Was he afraid that she would overturn the heavens? Thus, the group of people went down to the dungeon. As expected, Gong Yimo saw Bai Chio whose face was covered in blood. She sighed in her heart. In her previous life, Bai Ji helped her a lot, so she still had the heart to take care of this Bai Chio. Although she didn't agree with his character and behavior, she turned a blind eye to it because of her relationship with Bai Ji. She didn't expect that he was really disfigured. She didn't know if urine powder was effective on his injury. As soon as he saw Bai Chio, he was still in shock as to why Gong Yimo would appear here. Gong Yimo let out a delicate shout. Didn't I tell you to go hunting? Why did you come here? It seems that this consort needs to properly teach you what it means to be a boy toy. Boy toy. Bai Chio's entire body stiffened. The way he looked at Gong Yimo was like he was about to spit fire. However, he wasn't stupid enough to expose him at this time. He lowered his head and said, I'm sorry, Princess. Lu Jin watched from the side and suddenly laughed. Bai Chio, I didn't expect that you would have such a day. Didn't you look down on women the most? Now you are actually a gigolo. When Bai Chio heard this, he clenched his fists tightly and forcefully suppressed his temper. Gong Yimo wasn't happy. What does General Lu mean? Are you looking down on this consort? I don't dare to. It's just that since this fellow is already disfigured, why don't Princess abandon him and pick another one? Gong Yimo snorted, I don't care. As long as he can be used, it's fine. As for the face, she frowned, it's the same even if the lights are off. Quickly bring him out. This consort has something to say to him. Lu Jin saw that Gong Yimo was determined to bring Bai Chio away and was somewhat hesitant. Gong Yimo slightly raised her eyebrows and said at the right time. Why? This camp is filled with General's people. Could it be that General is afraid that a weak woman like me or a boy toy can do something? Why would I? Lu Jin recalled that this princess was said to know some martial arts. He gave up on the idea of falling out in the prison and said with a smile. Since Princess wants him, then bring him away. Princess, please rest for a while. This humble official will go and prepare a banquet to entertain Princess. Gong Yimo arrogantly nodded, sure. Just like this, Bai Chio was directly sent to Gong Yimo's tent after being cleaned up. However, his face was still bleeding and the wound was very deep. She was afraid that the jade countenance powder wouldn't work. Only the muscle revitalization ointment that Si Wuyan took out last time would be effective. However, as a man, he could endure a face full of beard in the past. Now that he only had a scar, it wasn't a big deal. She hooked her finger at him, come and sit down. Bai Chio wasn't willing to get close to her but he still sat down after hearing her words. Gong Yimo then took out the ointment and gauze to bandage him. When Gong Yimo's fingertips touched Bai Chio's face, he frowned in disgust. He hated being touched by all women since he was young. However, because Gong Yimo was very close to him, she lowered her voice and spoke. The people outside definitely couldn't hear it. Just now, I saw that Lu Jin was temporarily in charge of the army. Because this was an order given by Bai Ji after he was injured, no one dared to go against it. However, after this order was given, Bai Ji was hidden by Lu Jin. Right now, we don't know if he's alive or dead. Bai Chio heard her words, father has many loyal subordinates. It's impossible for all of them to betray him. Gong Yimo lowered her eyelids and tended to his wound, there are those people. However, this morning, I saw that Lu Jin sent those loyal to Bai Ji to patrol the border. In other words, the Dragon City camp is now his people. That's why I came in. Her words made Bai Chio's heart move. He glanced at Gong Yimo who was so close to him. As if he was burned by her beauty, he immediately looked away. Why did you do this? Could it be that she really liked him? Gong Yimo knew what he was thinking at a glance. She smiled unhappily, put away those dirty thoughts in your mind. My sweetheart is 10,000 times better looking than you. I won't fall for a simple vegetable kanji like you. Bai Chio frowned. That's good. I was just afraid that you had some conspiracy. After all, there was no free lunch in the world. Why was she so good to him? Gong Yimo sneered. Conspiracy. You should be thankful that you have a good father. It was actually related to his father. Bai Chio racked his brains but couldn't think of any connection. He simply stopped thinking about it. What should we do next? Father's life is at stake. Don't worry. Gong Yimo thought for a moment. The tiger tally is split into two. As long as Bai Ji doesn't hand over the other half, Lu Jin won't kill him. However, the situation is different now. Since we're here, Lu Jin will definitely speed up the process. Perhaps he will choose to kill him directly and then let others support him to become the new general of the border. Although it's not legitimate to do this, what's done is done. As long as the capital is well organized, father will definitely be deceived. After all, the emperor gave Bai Ji the privilege to choose his successor. It was easy to hide it. Bai Chio was burning with anxiety. When do you think they will take action? Gong Yimo thought for a moment. At the latest tonight. Chapter 439. It was a dark and windy night. Your Highness, why do you want to hand over the control of the Imperial Army? Won't the Crown Prince be like a tiger that has grown wings? Lo Chi asked in confusion. On horseback, Gong Ju leisurely trotted along. Because I don't need it anymore. Don't need it. Lo Chi was even more confused. Who would complain about having too many subordinates? He looked at the 3,000 people behind him. These people were willing to follow Gong Dai from the Imperial Army. In other words, they would become Gong Dai's private army and were all loyal. If they could leave with Gong Dai, they probably didn't have any relatives to worry about. They left the city in the middle of the night under the emperor's order to build the national highway. However, once they were out of the city, Gong Dai reined in his horse and said to Lo Chi, "You take your men and leave first. I still have things to do." Luo Chi didn't dare to ask about Gong Ju's whereabouts. He received the order and left first. Gong Ju only selected 50 people to stay behind, then turned around and went to another road. Gong Che kept pushing him. Although it was exactly what he wanted, he had already achieved his goal. Before leaving, how could he not return the favor? Gong Dai sneered with a bloodthirsty look in his eyes. Gong Che also knew that Gong Dai wouldn't let him go. When he thought of Gong Dai leaving in the middle of the night, Gong Che wasn't happy at all. Instead, he was angry. It was like punching cotton, but he couldn't go against the emperor's will. Gong Che's jade-like fingers moved around the map. This map was the distribution map of the capital. Gong Che's family was big and many of his strongholds were in the capital. Gong Dai would definitely make him suffer a great loss. Therefore, he hesitated between the Dragon Tiger Gorge and the 100 Cities barracks. Dragon Tiger Gorge was where Gong Che's own fleet was docked. It was very safe. There were mountains on two sides, water on one side, and only one way out. If Gong Dai went there, he would be like a turtle in a jar. He might even be able to kill him. Gong Dai's military power was handed over to one of his subordinates. Gong Dai was very familiar with this place, and it would be easy for him to play tricks there. These two places were very far apart, and Gong Dai had few subordinates. It was impossible for him to go to both places. So, which place would he choose? No matter what, it was easier to attack the 100 Cities barracks, and there was no risk. However, Gong Dai might take risks. Gong Che reclined in his chair and let go of his thoughts. Suddenly, there was a sudden clap of thunder. It was raining again. Under the drizzle, Gong Dai and his group galloped towards a certain place. His goal had never changed. Little Seven followed him. He knew that the prince was definitely going to find trouble with the crown prince. However, they only had so many people. Could they succeed? With so many people, it was not enough to go to the 100 Cities barracks. However, it was enough to go to Dragon Tiger Gorge. Gong Dai closed his eyes and allowed the rain to wet his hair and clothes. However, he could smell the scent of freedom. Gong Che also opened his eyes and quickly ordered people to go out. His subordinate, Muyuk, carefully asked, "Your Highness, where are we going?" Gong Che said without turning his head, "Gather the entire army. We are going to Dragon Tiger Gorge." He did not have any plans to split up the army because he wanted to directly kill Gong Dai. He predicted that Gong Dai would definitely go to Dragon Tiger Gorge. That place was dangerous, but there was no defense. Gong Dai would definitely go there. The night was pitch black. Under the illumination of the palace lanterns, the raindrops formed a line. Even though it was summer, people could still feel the chill. Gong Che's entire army was mobilized. The momentum was definitely not small. When Gong Cheng heard the report, he sneered. If either Gong Che or Gong Dai died, perhaps it would be a good thing. In any case, if he interfered, the situation would become even more out of control. However, although he said that he was cold-blooded, in fact, he was so worried that he could not sleep at all. He did not want to send his son away. The rainy night seemed to have sped up the dangerous pace. Gong Ju and the others were focused on their journey. No one spoke, and everyone's faces were grim. They knew that Longhu Gorge was a dangerous place. Once they were surrounded, it would be a dead end. "Your Highness, we have arrived at Dragon Tiger Gorge," Little Seven said. The first thing they saw were countless ships between the two mountains. The soldiers guarding the ships saw them and quickly stopped them. Gong Dai did not say much. He pulled out his narrow sword. The sword shook and countless water droplets were scattered. "Kill!" He gave the order softly, but it was as sharp as the edge of a sword. Gong Yimo, who was far away in the north, was somewhat absent-minded. Lu Jin kept toasting her, as if he wanted to make her drunk. She was at a loss on how to find out Bai Ji's whereabouts. Even if she kidnapped Lu Jin or killed him, what if his subordinates killed Bai Ji in anger? Suddenly, she felt something under her clothes. She lifted it up and saw a black and gray monkey lying under her clothes. It was obviously exhausted. She did not know why it could find her from so far away and follow her. For no reason, it made Gong Yimo's heart feel warm. It came at the right time. She poked it with her hand. The monkey glared at her and turned over unhappily. At this time, Gong Yimo saw something hanging on its chest. She took it out and saw that it was a bamboo slip. She opened it and saw a letter inside. Strange. Could it be that this monkey met someone? She opened the paper and saw that it was full of words. Gong Yimo did not recognize any of them. Since she did not recognize them, she wanted to keep them for later. However, those words seemed to have magical powers. She clearly did not recognize them, but she read them carefully one by one. Gong Yimo frowned and threw the letter into her space. At this time, Lu Jin and the others were surrounded by many women. These were the military prostitutes in the camp. This kind of behavior was definitely not something that Bai Ji could tolerate. They must have been found after Lu Jin took over. From this, one could see the difference in character between the two. Gong Yimo pulled the little monkey's ear and said softly, "Sleep later. Go and do something for me." The little monkey moved its little body and pointed its butt at her. It was still angry. It did not want to care about this woman. Gong Yimo was speechless. She pulled its ear again and said fiercely, "Hurry up, or I will eat you. I heard that monkey brains are very nutritious." As soon as she said that, the little monkey clawed back. This person was simply a pervert. Gong Yimo smiled. "Go and look at every corner of the camp. There is a place that must be heavily guarded. Moreover, there is a person. I want to find him." The little monkey tilted its head and thought for a while. "Do you understand?" Gong Yimo looked at it threateningly. It shrunk its body and hurriedly left. At this time, Lu Jin inadvertently saw a black shadow. Perhaps it was some small animal. He did not care about it and walked towards Gong Yimo with a wine glass. After drinking some wine, his lust increased. Looking at Gong Yimo's beautiful face, he could not suppress the thoughts in his heart. "Princess. You are a person who knows how to enjoy life. Why, would you like that gigolo by Chio?" Chapter 440. At this time, Bai Chio came in with wine. He walked to Gong Yimo's side, but was stopped by Gong Yimo. She smiled. "Your face is a bit pale, but it's useful. Do you have a problem with it?" Lu Jin's body went limp from being stared at by that pair of beautiful eyes. He nodded repeatedly. "No problem, no problem. Look at this subject, I'm also very useful." As he spoke, he was extremely daring and actually reached out his hand towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo stepped back and then pulled Bai Chio to block his hand. In the next second, Bai Chio actually sat in Gong Yimo's arms. The wine pot in his hand was also snatched away by Gong Yimo. This position made him feel so ashamed that he wanted to die. However, he endured it in front of Lu Jin. He wanted to see what Gong Yimo meant by this. Lu Jin was a bit resentful when his hand was blocked. He secretly glared at Bai Chio and said coldly, "Poor General Bai, you have a heroic reputation, but your son is actually a gigolo. Don't you think it's funny?" The people in the tent were very cooperative. The people who were loyal to Bai Ji were all transferred out, so Lu Jin had no scruples. The words he said made Bai Chio want to pull out his sword and kill him. "Don't move." Feeling Bai Chio's body suddenly tense, Gong Yimo warned in a low voice. Bai Chio was uncomfortable, and she also felt uncomfortable hugging him. If Gong Dai found out. Her body trembled and she didn't dare to think about it anymore. "General Lu, you're scaring the lovely person in Ben Gong's arms." Gong Yimo grabbed Bai Chio to calm him down, then looked up at Lu Jin and said in a cold voice. He wanted to cooperate, but what was the meaning of stepping on her people? Lu Jin heard her dissatisfaction and immediately smiled. "Princess, please forgive me." This subject drank wine and spoke without thinking. "I've made a fool of myself." Gong Yimo lowered her eyelids. "If there's nothing else, then leave. Don't hinder Ben Gong from flirting with Bai Chio." Flirting. Bai Chio had goosebumps all over his body, but Gong Yimo's hand held him tightly, preventing him from ruining things. Lu Jin was stunned. He felt that perhaps he was really making a mountain out of a molehill. This princess was obviously a pervert with some tricks and brains. There was really nothing to be wary of. Then, should he still kill Bai Ji tonight? Lu Jin pondered as he walked back. "What are you trying to do?" Grabbing Gong Yimo's collar, Bai Chio gritted his teeth and asked in a low voice. He wasn't a boy toy. He wasn't a gigolo. Gong Yimo had a headache. All along, the men she met, except for Shen Shiyi, were all calm and self-controlled. It was the first time she met someone like Bai Chio, who was old-fashioned and irritable. "If you move again and fail to save your father, don't blame me." Gong Yimo lowered her voice and whispered in his ear. Her hot breath made Bai Chio's hair stand on end. His face was tense as he sat in Gong Yimo's embrace like a block of wood. After a while, he finally understood what she meant. Do you have a way? His voice lowered by an octave. Who told him to ask for help? Gong Yimo was satisfied. You'll know in a while. Now, drink. As she spoke, she poured the wine that Bai Chio brought in earlier into his mouth. She created the illusion that she was really flirting with a boy toy. The more ridiculous she acted, the more relaxed Lu Jin became. So Gong Yimo simply took revenge by pouring wine down his throat. Because she poured it down too quickly, the wine fell from the corner of his mouth, giving off a lewd feeling. Bai Chio was being hugged by Gong Yimo. His face was flushed with shame and anger. His thick eyebrows were knitted into a dead knot. But his eyes were half closed and for a moment, his eyes were glittering. At such a close distance, Gong Yimo looked at his side profile and felt a sense of amazement. Many people looked over and secretly swallowed their saliva. Although Bai Chio was sitting in Gong Yimo's embrace, he did not feel out of place. Because the way Gong Yimo poured wine down his throat was really overbearing and charming. It made people want to drag Bai Chio away and replace him with their own bodies. They suddenly realized that if the other party was Gong Yimo, being a boy toy did not seem so unacceptable. Thinking about it, their breathing quickened. Because of the wine, their bodies were already hot and the scene in front of them made their blood boil. What about Bai Chio? He was already stunned. He clearly hated being touched by women the most. He clearly thought that if Gong Yimo really wanted him to be a boy toy, he would fight with his life. But now, Gong Yimo saw that he choked on the wine and smiled proudly while wiping his face with a handkerchief. He raised his head and saw a pair of eyes that seemed to gather thousands of stars in front of him. He was a little dazed and forgot to be angry. At this time, the monkey actually came back. Seeing the monkey, Bai Chio quickly regained his senses and saw Gong Yimo lowering her head and whispering into his ear. The warm fragrance wrapped around him. What he did not know was that this was the smell that the current Prince Chi was obsessed with. Do you understand? Bai Chio felt that she stuffed something into his hand and nodded after a long time. Then, he saw Gong Yimo kissing him in public. According to the plan, he should have splashed the wine on the table at her, but seeing her smiling red lips, that bright color, made his heart beat faster and faster. He even hoped that she would kiss him like this. But Gong Yimo saw that he was in a daze and fiercely pinched him. Bai Chio hurriedly grabbed the wine on the table and poured it on her face. Then, his eyes became watery and he gasped for breath. It seemed that he had experienced an incomparable struggle. He originally wanted to say something to express his anger, but the next second, he was shocked by the shocking beauty in front of him and could not say a word. The wine flowed down her sparkling face and wet her hair and long eyelashes. She began to close her eyes and let the wine drip down. Then, she suddenly opened her eyes. At that moment, her beauty had an impact. It almost made him suffocate. The so-called pear blossom with spring rain. In the past, Bai Chio did not understand what a stunning beauty was. Why would a woman be called an enchantress that could bring disaster to a country? Why would someone spend a lot of money for a woman's smile? He did not understand in the past and even scoffed at it. But now, he understood. He looked on helplessly as the pair of smiling eyes turned vicious. She slapped Bai Chio. Bastard! Just because I think highly of you, you can go against me. Gong Yimo pushed him away. Bai Chio covered his face and left her embrace. So it was this kind of cold feeling. Lu Jin saw that they were quarreling and quickly said, Princess, are you okay? As he spoke, he walked towards Gong Yimo and fiercely kicked Bai Chio. Who do you think you are? Princess thought highly of you and gave you some face. You still want to take advantage of her. Bai Chio was kicked by his enemy. He pinched his palm and endured it. He glared at Gong Yimo. I didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't have done it in front of so many people. Bai Chio bit his lips. He was so embarrassed that he wanted to die. He played the role of a young master who was forced to be a gigolo in front of so many people. Gong Yimo secretly nodded and coldly snorted, I don't believe that I can't tame you. Just you wait, I will change my clothes and come over. At that time, I want you to please me in front of so many people. You better prepare. Chapter 441. After Gong Yimo finished speaking, she flung her sleeves and left. Lu Jin was amused. Forcing Bai Chio to please a woman in front of so many people, was there anything more humiliating than this? This was good, just what he wanted. However, Lu Jin was still not at ease. He sent someone who knew martial arts to follow her. Since Bai Chio was still here, he was not worried about Gong Yimo causing trouble. Gong Yimo naturally noticed that person immediately. She walked into her tent, then cut a hole in the back of the tent and went out. When that person saw that Gong Yimo was about to change her clothes, his lust was aroused. He immediately forgot to hide and went over to take a look. In the end, he was knocked unconscious by Gong Yimo. It was raining in Dayu State, but there was still a bright moon hanging high in the sky. It shone on her cold eyes and the corner of her mouth carried a trace of evil smile. She patted Little Monkey, let's go, it's up to you. When Little Monkey heard this, he quickly led the way. Gong Yimo followed closely behind. She held a hidden blade in her hand and calmly walked into the depths of the camp. Gong Yimo did not return for a long time. Lu Jin finally felt uneasy. He originally saw that Gong Yimo was blinded by greed and was not afraid of her, so he wanted to let Bai Ji live for a few more days. After all, killing him was the last resort. But now, he could not sit still. However, Bai Chio was still here. Gong Yimo would not leave him behind. Thinking of this, he did not dare to act rashly. You, go and see why the princess is not back yet. He pointed to a general beside him. He personally went. Bai Chio held the thing in his hand and was a little puzzled. It was said that the thing in his hand could hurt people if it was thrown to the ground. However, he was still a little uneasy. Could he really save his father tonight? On the other side, rain was falling. Gong Dai did not do much, but the soldiers stationed at Dragon Tiger Gorge were all slaughtered. He looked at the hundreds of ships in front of him and smiled faintly. Burn them. That was more than 100 ships. Gong Che earned a lot of money by relying on them. Yes. Little Seven accepted the order excitedly. Fortunately, the rain wasn't too heavy. They could start a fire from the inside and set the ship ablaze. How much had Gong Che caused him to lose? Tonight, he was going to make Gong Che lose even more. These ships were a major pillar of Gong Che's economy. If they were burned, how long would Gong Che be able to keep his peace? After setting the fire, the continuous flames reflected the continuous rain. Because the boat was in the water, Gong Dai was not worried that the fire would spread to the shore. Looking at the jumping flames, the depression in his heart was swept away, and he was in a good mood. Suddenly, the sound of horse hooves could be heard from afar. Judging from the sound, there were obviously quite a number of people. Little Seven was anxious. The ship was burned, and their only way out was blocked. How were they going to leave? When Gong Dai heard the commotion, he calmly led his men in a certain direction. Little Seven thought about the terrain. That place was a dead end. But the prince had already left, so he couldn't hesitate. He quickly led the rest of the people to follow. But the worry in his heart grew heavier. He was afraid that a fierce battle was unavoidable. Gong Che quickly arrived, but because he was late, the ship was destroyed. His face was tense, and he wanted to cut Gong Dai into pieces. Someone went down to check the traces and reporting to Your Highness, the thief ran in that direction. Gong Che looked. That place was clearly a dead end. Why did Gong Dai want to go there? Originally, he thought that Gong Dai would choose to leave by water. But now, he couldn't be sure. Mu Yu. This subject is here. Take 100 men and stay behind to put out the fire. The rest, follow me. Mu Yu didn't agree. If everyone stayed behind to put out the fire, the losses would be much smaller. It was not easy to build these ships. They couldn't be built in a day. But Gong Che had already made up his mind. He lowered his head and accepted the order, yes. Gong Che left with his men without looking back. Naturally, he was also very clear that without these ships, his losses would be great. He also knew that if everyone stayed behind now, they would definitely be able to save these ships. But what they didn't know was that Gong Ju was his only goal. If he could kill him, not to mention these ships, he would be willing to give up the entire canal. Hearing the sound of horse hooves approaching again, Little Seven looked at Gong Dai's back. He didn't dare to speak. The rain fell on his face, but it chilled his heart. There was a collapsed mountain in front of this road. It had long been blocked. They couldn't pass at all. And behind them, there were more pursuers. From the number of pursuers, they knew that there were many of them. They were afraid that they wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. But Gong Dai kept looking forward. At this time, he was soaked, but his eyes were shockingly bright. He seemed to be eager to try. Lightning flashed in the sky from time to time, making people panic. If it wasn't for Gong Dai's strict management of the army and their blind trust in Gong Dai, they wouldn't want to take this road that was full of death. Gong Yimo had succeeded. There were corpses all over the ground. She carried the unconscious Bai Ji out of the place where he was imprisoned. Gong Yimo quickly escaped, not daring to delay for even a moment. The monkey was squatting on her other shoulder. Gong Yimo was still very friendly towards this kind of godly assistance. This was the deepest part of the camp. Lu Jin hid well, but the little monkey was smart and petite. It was also very fast. No one was on guard against it. But Bai Ji was still quite heavy. Gong Yimo weighed him and continued forward. There's an assassin. This shout was like a raging inferno, causing everyone to walk out. And from afar, Lu Jin heard the voice and was shocked. He never expected that someone would risk their life for a stranger. One person against 10,000 soldiers. He looked at Bai Chio gloomily and reached out to grab him. Without Bai Ji, this person could also be used as a hostage. At this critical moment, Bai Chio threw the thing in his hands to the ground. In an instant, a loud explosion made everyone in the tent look down. But they realized that although this thing looked scary, it didn't have any killing power. But when they came back to their senses, Bai Chio was nowhere to be seen. At this critical moment, Bai Chio ran away. Lu Jin couldn't care less. Bai Ji was more important. How hateful. When he saw Gong Yimo tolerating Bai Chio, he thought that she really liked him. He didn't expect that she deliberately created an illusion. She used Bai Chio to deceive them and turned around to save Bai Ji. Really? How hateful. The whole camp was mobilized. The momentum was still very scary. Bai Chio took advantage of the chaos to knock out a person and put on his armor. Then, he frantically searched for Gong Yimo's figure. He had to admit that when he was in the tent, he was more worried about Gong Yimo than he was about his father. How could a woman be so daring? Was she really not afraid of death? Death? Of course, Gong Yimo was afraid. But she was alone. Without Bai Qiu to drag her down, she carried Bai Ji and fought her way out. It wasn't too difficult. Of course, it wouldn't be too easy. Chapter 442. These soldiers were only temporarily deceived. She did not want to kill them all, so she was in a difficult position. Moreover, she specifically chose to attack their wrists to make them lose their ability to fight, which greatly increased the difficulty of escaping. Really, aggrieved. Lu Jin chased after her and shouted, "Don't let the assassin take General Bai away." With his order, everyone thought that Gong Yimo was plotting against Bai Ji, and they were all indebted to Bai Ji, so they were even more ruthless. Gong Yimo had no choice but to be more ruthless. When she really had to kill someone, she would definitely not be lenient. How could she be the opponent of so many people by herself, so she fought while retreating. Fortunately, those people were afraid of Bai Ji in her hands, so they were a little hesitant. Seeing that Gong Yimo was really going to escape, Lu Jin could not care so much anymore and shouted, "Quickly kill her. General Bai is not moving, obviously he has been killed by her. Don't let her take General Bai's body away. That will be the disgrace of our Dragon City camp." When those soldiers heard, Gong Yimo actually killed General Bai, their eyes turned red, and Gong Yimo was surrounded by enemies, so she did not have time to explain. After all, Bai Ji was really unconscious. Flesh and blood splattered, she saw that Bai Qiu actually ran over. Was he trying to help or cause more trouble? In this crisis, she threw Bai Ji on him, and blocked all the blades by herself. "Take him away. I will cover the rear." But Bai Qiu held his father, hesitating. "Get lost." Gong Yimo was anxious, she only had time to reply with a word. Bai Qiu's eyes turned red, and he really retreated with Bai Ji. With one less person on her back, even if there were thousands of soldiers and horses in front of her, she was not afraid at all. Wasn't it just covering 2 people? It's been a long time since I exercised my muscles. Gong Yimo twisted her neck. "Come. Kill her." "What should we do, Prince? It's a dead end in front." Little Seven looked behind him nervously. The so-called iron horses and golden spears were nothing more than this, even the thunder could not suppress the sound of the horses' hooves. Wave after wave, it was as if they were trampling on their hearts. Gong Dai calmly stared at the mountain in front of him, and a 3-dimensional image immediately appeared in his mind. Although he had never tried this before, he had never forgotten what the royal sister had taught him. "Prince!" Little Seven shouted anxiously. In the next second, Gong Dai flew up and did something that they couldn't understand. Boom! Even the earth seemed to be trembling. Gong Che had originally thought that it was a sudden clap of thunder, but this tremor was not something that could be caused by lightning. In an instant, a thought flashed through his mind. It was unbelievable. It was actually Lei Feng. He ran forward like a madman. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Gong Yimo would hand her virginity to Gong Dai. Gong Dai's subordinates were also frightened by this earth-shattering sound. Dust flew everywhere and hit their bodies, but they didn't feel any pain. They still stared ahead without blinking, thinking in their hearts, was this the legendary weapon that the princess could use to break mountains and rivers? No wonder even the emperor wanted it, to be able to blow up a mountain in an instant, this kind of thing, they also wanted it. But this wasn't the end. Gong Dai didn't just want to blow up the mountain, he wanted to blow it through. The continuous loud sounds shook everyone's hearts. Many people behind Gong Che didn't know what was going on, but towards the unknown, they showed fear. Even the horses under them didn't want to continue forward, but they were driven by the whip and couldn't retreat. Finally, with a final loud explosion, a triangular hole was blasted out along the mountain wall. Gong Dai didn't hesitate, and flew up onto the horse. "Let's go." The others were still in a dream. Such a big wall blocked the way, but the prince only needed to use a few moves to dig out such a big hole. This was already not something that could be done by human strength, this was divine strength. So they passed through the mountain like they were in a dream, and then they saw Gong Dai do it again. Anyone who knew about explosives knew that the angle was very important, and it involved a lot of physical skills. Gong Dai didn't expect that all the things he had learned in the past could be used. And when Gong Che came, this was the scene he saw. The road was blown up, and Gong Dai stood alone on the opposite side of the tunnel, the rain falling. Gong Che looked at him with eyes wide open. "Why?" he shouted like a wild beast. Why is she so biased? Shit, the thing that Gong Yimo treasured as her life, she actually gave it to Gong Dai. Why? Gong Dai smiled slightly, and at this time, Gong Che reacted, frantically leading people to chase after him. But only a loud sound was heard. The horses neighed in unison as Gong Che was protected by Muyu with all her might. Then, all of them watched helplessly as the mountain that had been blasted apart collapsed once again, blocking the passage from before. They couldn't pass at all. Gong Dai. Gong Dai. At this time, there was still a buzzing in his ears. Gong Che pushed Muyu away and looked around. Debris kept falling on his body, but he didn't feel any pain. He braved the rain, his eyes red, looking for Gong Dai, but how could he find him? A broken wall blocked his way, separating him and Gong Dai into two different worlds. And the next second, a person stood tall on the broken wall, mixed with the rain. Gong Che couldn't see his face clearly, but he knew who he was. Gong Che. Gong Dai's voice came softly, with a hint of mockery. Why? The moment Gong Che heard his voice, he was instantly enraged. He looked up and questioned him. What right do you have? What right do you have? What right did Gong Yimo give you something more important than her life, and not me? Why? He still remembered how much Imo had suffered in order to protect this thing, but she had given it to Gong Dai. Gong Dai naturally knew what he meant. In the rain, his laughter sounded like a sound, with a trace of malice. What right do I have? Because she loves me. Everyone behind Gong Che didn't know what was going on, but they saw that Gong Che had lost his soul because of King Chi's words. You must be happy beating me up, taking my military power, damaging my bank, and even chasing me out of the capital. Are you happy? Gong Dai was very evil. He used the most vicious words to provoke Gong Che, completely crushing him mentally. No, it wasn't like that. Beating him up and forcing him to leave the capital, Gong Che knew very well that Gong Dai wanted to leave, so he allowed him to suppress him. He damaged Gong Dai's bank, but Gong Dai burned the fleet, and his losses were even greater. As for the military power, Gong Che was so angry that his whole body was trembling. No wonder Gong Dai had handed it over so easily, and only took away 3,000 men. He had obtained with only 3,000 men. He could create a terrifying army comparable to 100,000 soldiers. He couldn't defeat Gong Dai at all. Chapter 443. This thought made Gong Che disheartened. For so many years, he always thought that Gong Dai was on par with him. Even when Gong Dai did not fight back, he let down his guard and thought that Gong Dai was only a so-so. But today, he knew how terrifying Gong Dai was. If he did not have a weapon in his hands, he could also retreat easily. What a joke. He treated him as an opponent, but the other party did not care about him at all. Was there anything more humiliating than this? I'm going to kill you. Gong Dai. I'm going to kill you. This person was definitely his biggest obstacle. No matter in which aspect. Kill him. Gong Dai smiled. Rainwater flowed from his lips to his chin. His tone was quiet, but it was so dangerous that it made people tremble. You should be glad. He smiled like a demon, but his face was as beautiful as a fairy. If it wasn't for her, I think I would be happy to use your body to test this weapon. At that moment, in this potholed rainy ground, one was on top, one was on the bottom. It was very close, but also very far. There was a gap in between. It was a fight to the death. Gong Yimo's hands gradually weakened. This could not go on. There were too many people on the other side. They were like maggots attached to bones. It was annoying. Especially when they were covering two people, it made people even more anxious. Gong Yimo. Be careful. Bai Qiu saw a cold knife in the dark. With Bai Qiu's reminder, Gong Yimo avoided it. Her heart was burning with anger. She killed a gap and used her inner strength to transmit her voice. I'll say it again. I'm here to save Bai Ji. Lu Jin tried to kill Bai Ji. You are helping the evildoer. Many people hesitated. But Lu Jin was not someone to be trifled with. He immediately shouted. General Bai is my adoptive father. He treated me well. Now that my adoptive father died in the hands of this traitor who pretended to be a princess, she must want to take my adoptive father's corpse to claim credit. You must let her blood splatter on the spot. The soldiers' eyes were red. At this moment, they naturally believed Lu Jin, so they charged over. Gong Yimo was truly enraged. In the next moment, her murderous aura seemed to have solidified. At first, she still held back, but since these people didn't know what was good for them, she might as well just kill them. Many people who were near were intimidated by Gong Yimo's soaring killing intent. Even the swords in their hands began to tremble. However, military orders were absolute and they could not retreat. Sorry. Gong Yimo's eyes flashed with a bloody light. She was like an Azura. Not only did she stop retreating, she raised her saber and charged forward. Her sudden approach caused many people to retreat. Kill her. Lu Jin was afraid of Gong Yimo and hid far away. But this time, Gong Yimo did not show any mercy. Under the moonlight, she was like a blade fairy. Her gorgeous palace dress was dyed red with blood. She had a demonic beauty. Just one look and it would be etched in a lifetime. Bai Qiu knew that now was not the time to run away. If it was any other time, even if he had to carry his father on his back, he would still go back and help her. But her awe-inspiring manner made him understand that even if he went back, he would only be a burden. So for the first time in his life, he suppressed his impulse and escaped with Bai Ji. Gong Yimo's massacre was very shocking. She killed in and out of the troops alone with her saber. She was like a human weapon. Military advisor Lu was finally afraid. Let's retreat. She is too scary. We are no match for her. He was already scared out of his wits. Lu Jin pushed him away. His eyes were about to pop out. Why should we retreat? If she doesn't die today, we will be the ones to die in the future. Gong Yimo was in the middle of a bloody battle. She could not hear or see clearly. She seemed to have mastered the rhythm of killing. Every time her sword drew blood, there was the beauty of death. Finally, when she killed nearly 100 people in an instant, all the soldiers were afraid. They hesitated and did not dare to move forward. Was this person even human? In just a short while, the ground was already full of corpses. The moon was as bright as day, illuminating the corpses on the ground. Gong Yimo stood among them. When the wind blew, her whole body was stained with blood. But she was like a celestial being flying in the sky. She was definitely injured, but she did not care. She was the kind of person who would lose all sense of pain once she started killing. Just like now, there was a dagger at her waist. She took it out in front of everyone and casually threw it on the ground. It made a deep sound. Everyone's heart seemed to have fallen to the bottom of a valley in an instant. Her murderous aura condensed. It seemed that every time she killed someone, the sin of killing on her body would get heavier and heavier. When she swept her gaze, no one dared to look at her. They only felt that she was a god, invincible. As for them, they were just throwing eggs at a rock. They were just courting death. Still want to play? She flung the blood on her sword. That cold voice made everyone retreat again and again. When Lu Jin saw that those people were afraid of being killed, he also became timid. Go! Kill her, kill this demoness. Gong Yimo smiled. It was really a title that she had not heard for a long time. In this life, she wanted to be a saint. She heard a lot of gratitude, but in her previous life, she was always a demoness. When she smiled, a wind rose from the ground. It seemed to spiral with her as the center. The soldiers felt that the wind was like a blade. They were shocked and kept retreating. It's just a corpse. Are you sure you want to add more casualties for a corpse? Her light words made people's hearts waver. Her eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty light, adding more fuel to the fire. It's okay. If you want to die, I don't mind sending you on your way. As soon as she finished speaking, the inner strength transformed into a violent wind whistled. They had never heard of such a high level of skill. They only felt that it was as if a deity had descended to the world. Finally, when the biting cold wind cut through their clothes, it also seemed to have broken their last line of defense. Everyone retreated. Monster. She must be a monster. After fighting for so long and suffering so many casualties, she seemed to be fine. She could even use inner strength to transform her body. Could she be an old monster from the legends? Gong Yimo smiled and took a step forward. Those people took a step back. No matter how much Lu Jin scolded them from behind, they held their blades and did not dare to take a step forward. Gong Yimo walked forward calmly. The smell of blood on her body was oppressive. It made everyone retreat again and again. She actually created a path. She walked neither fast nor slow. The clothes on her body moved without wind. That was the demeanor of an expert. Her killing intent was overwhelming, making them want to kneel down and surrender. Just like that, she walked out of the encirclement. Gong Yimo suddenly turned around. It was so far away that he should not be able to see clearly. However, Lu Jin felt that her eyes fell on him. It made his back stiffen and his breathing stop. You should be glad. Her clear voice was sent to his ears by her inner strength. It was like the music of death, making him shudder. If it wasn't for the fact that I didn't want to kill all of Bai Ji's subordinates, tonight would be the day you die. Lu Jin's legs went soft and he fell to the ground. He did not doubt that if it wasn't for Bai Ji, Gong Yimo would have killed him from the start. Now, he did not have Bai Ji as his trump card. Gong Yimo also escaped. What awaited him was only death. Chapter 444. After saying this sentence, Gong Yimo turned and left. But with every step she took, the aura of her body increased layer by layer, making it impossible for anyone to resist. In the end, the army watched her leave. The ground was full of corpses and the smell of blood was overwhelming. However, no one dared to ask her for an explanation. Until her figure was swallowed by the night, the murderous aura gradually disappeared. Many people were sweating profusely, as if they had just escaped from death. Was there really such a powerful person? Many people were trembling in fear, but they were still silent and did not dare to speak. Was it really that easy? Gong Yimo's mouth was bleeding non-stop. The more she wiped, the more blood there was. The aura just now was at least at the 7th level. However, in order to frighten everyone, she used her inner force to create an illusion of deterrence when she was injured and exhausted, which worsened her internal injury. Now that she had left the crowd, her entire body was dispirited, and exhaustion could be seen between her brows. However, she could not stop, because that Lu Jin was very smart. Once he regained his senses, he would definitely pursue her without restraint. She had to go further away and hide. On the other side, Bai Qiu was already burning with anxiety. He was quite familiar with this area and found a bush to hide. However, after so long, Gong Yimo still did not come out. The monkey was sleeping by his feet. Obviously, it had fallen asleep. Bai Qiu could not leave, so he could only ask the monkey for help. You should go and find her. Bai Qiu was quite gentle to the little monkey. However, when the little monkey saw someone disturbing its sleep, it clawed at Bai Qiu. There were 3 bloody marks on Bai Qiu's hand. It was painful and numb. Bai Qiu was angry. If you don't find her, she will die. Can you bear to see her die? Only then did the little monkey move. She couldn't die, therefore, it angrily got up and went out to find her. It felt that it was so difficult to raise a person. It had to worry about everything. It followed the blood trail and found Gong Yimo. At this time, Gong Yimo was holding onto a tree and seemed to have fainted. However, the monkey did not know. It was shocked and quickly called Bai Qiu to help. This trip was really tiring for the monkey. On the other side, when everyone walked out from the shadow of death, Lu Jin was the first to realize that something was wrong. If Gong Yimo was really that powerful, it wouldn't have taken so much effort to retreat with Bai Qiu and the others in the beginning. Moreover, if Gong Yimo was really that powerful, how could she be injured? Thinking about it carefully, there were many suspicious points. Suddenly, a possibility flashed in Lu Jin's mind. Could it be that Gong Yimo wasn't that powerful at all? Could it be that he had taken some secret medicine to temporarily increase his power? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let go of such a good opportunity to kill him. He had been tricked. Lu Jin could no longer sit still and sent troops to search for Gong Yimo's whereabouts. When things reach an extreme, Gong Yimo must be very weak right now. Since he and Gong Yimo had already gotten to this point, he could only kill her. The soldiers were still a little unwilling, but after listening to Lu Jin's analysis, they felt that it was reasonable. One after another, they left. In their hearts, they were a little angry at Gong Yimo for scaring them. She had to be caught. When Bai Qiu saw Gong Yimo's lifeless appearance, he was scared out of his wits. He went over to check her breathing. When he found that she was only unconscious, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he brought Gong Yimo to his father's place. Now that there were 2 injured people, what should he do? Bai Qiu frowned. On the other side, the little monkey was very straightforward and directly gave Gong Yimo a claw. Gong Yimo slapped the little monkey with her back hand and pressed it to the ground, unable to move. Although there was a claw mark on its face, it was awake. She faintly glanced at the little monkey. Little monkey, it must have wanted to scratch her claw for a long time, right? However, she didn't have time to bicker with a monkey. Right now, she had to think of a way to escape. Bai Chio said, "You said that some people loyal to father were sent to patrol the border. If we can find them, we will be safe." Gong Yimo thought about it and felt that it made sense. Hence, she stood up shakily and said to Bai Chio, "You can take your father with you. I can walk on my own." Bai Chio retracted his hand and nodded. Then, he led the way. Although the little monkey was hit by Gong Yimo, it still jumped onto her shoulder and walked together. Under the cover of the forest, they continued to head north. However, very soon, the pursuers arrived. Gong Yimo heard the sound. There were quite a lot of people coming. It was obvious that they were determined to catch them. And Bai Chio was carrying 2 injured people, so they couldn't go far. Gong Yimo made a prompt decision and stuffed the gold medal into Bai Chio's hands. "Take the gold medal and go find those people to help. Your father and I will stay behind. Don't worry, I have a way to stall for time." Bai Chio was of course unwilling. "No, I will stay behind." "You go." Gong Yimo glared at him. "Can you not let your emotions affect your decisions? Those people must know you, right? They don't know me. I will only waste time if I go." Bai Chio felt that leaving these 2 injured people here was clearly a dead end. They had already confronted Lu Jin. Now, in order to survive, Lu Jin would definitely kill Gong Yimo if he met her. He couldn't do that. "This is an order," Gong Yimo suddenly said seriously. Under the moonlight, her small face was pale. Her arrogance was still there. Her decision couldn't be changed. Bai Chio suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Gong Yimo and his Bai family were not related. But now, the one who betrayed them was his father's adopted son. The one who saved them was an outsider, and a woman. Bai Chio suddenly knelt down. "Princess's kindness, Bai family will never forget it. This time, please let me stay. Princess is precious and shouldn't be involved in this." The night wind blew her clothes. She stood there covered in blood. But her expression was indifferent. Her beauty was like a fairy who was about to ascend to immortality. She sighed and shook her head. "You go. I can guarantee that I will survive. Can you?" He couldn't. Gong Yimo helped Bai Chio up. She looked into his eyes and said softly, "Who said that women are not as good as men? You, watch carefully." As she said that, she used her inner force and pushed him far away. Bai Chio looked at her blood-stained sleeves. She turned around resolutely and led his father into the depths of the forest. At that moment, her back was tall and clear. It was the only memory of a woman in his mind. Bai Chio finally left. Gong Yimo tried her best to hide Bai Ji in the bushes. She let Little Monkey keep watch while she buried some hidden weapons. Finally, she sat under a big tree. Her skirt spread out. She took some medicine. Then, she tore the cloth that was tied around her waist and began to apply the medicine on herself. When the pursuers caught up, what they saw was such a beautiful scene. A woman knelt down, her black hair draped over her shoulders. Her clothes were bright red, and her small face was fair and clear under the moonlight. Her expression was peaceful, but the wounds on her body were bleeding. The combination of these tragic and calm colors was the thickest and most colorful brush stroke between heaven and earth. Chapter 446. Gong Yimo clenched her teeth as she watched him take off his clothes. The taste of blood in her mouth had yet to dissipate, but now it was filled with a sweet taste. There were still a few hundred people who did not dare to come over. But here, under the tree, Lu Jin was actually shameless enough to take off his clothes in front of a few hundred people. Gong Yimo closed her eyes and tried to adjust her breathing. She would catch him off guard later. But she was too tired. Her head was dizzy. When she closed her eyes, she had a feeling that she did not want to open them. She frowned and sat under the tree. She leaned against the tree trunk like a lifeless porcelain doll. But she was so beautiful that it was shocking. She was so fragile and tough that people could not take their eyes off her. Even Lu Jin was stunned. He who was about to take off his pants could not help but lower his head and reach out to pinch her chin. At this moment, a cold light flashed in Gong Yimou's eyes. A dagger appeared out of thin air. She was going to cut off his hand. Ah! Lu Jin screamed and retreated. Gong Yimou opened her eyes. She was a little surprised. Her attack missed because someone was one step ahead of her. An arrow was shot and pierced through Lu Jin's palm. Gong Yimou turned around and saw Bai Qiu standing there with a bow and arrow. His face was serious and his chest was still moving up and down violently. But he caught up. And when he saw Lu Jin taking off his clothes and wanting to take advantage of Gong Yimou, he shot an arrow without thinking. He wanted to teach him a lesson. Lu Jin fell to the ground and pulled out the arrow from his palm. He stared at Bai Qiu and wanted to eat his flesh. It's you again. Good, I will take care of you together. Just when he was about to explode, many people rushed over. Lu Jin took a look and saw that it was Wen Tian who was loyal to Bai Ji. That guy had seen Bai Qiu before. He only had a few hundred people rushing over. Wen Tian was patrolling the border and had a few thousand people under him. He could not fight them head-on. That Bai Qiu had the ability to get Wen Tian here. He gritted his teeth and glanced at Gong Yimou. She was holding a dagger in her hand. She was not someone to be trifled with. He glanced at Bai Qiu again. Bai Qiu pulled out an arrow again and aimed at him. Lu Jin was extremely unwilling, but he still turned around and fled. Bai Qiu was flustered and did not chase after them. Gong Yimou was relieved. She waved her hand and the dagger she used to sneak attack fell to the ground, destroying the last trap. The sound of the explosion made Bai Qiu rush in front of her. Are you all right? He didn't dare to reach out to touch her. At this moment, she was as fragile as a person made of snow. His voice was so soft that it would startle her. When Gong Yimou saw that it was Bai Qiu, she felt relieved and fainted. Bai Qiu quickly held her in his arms. At the last moment, he heard her softly call out 2 words. Gong Dai, Your Highness, what's wrong? They were all extremely excited about the counterattack. At this time, they also guessed that the weapon in their prince's hands must be the divine weapon in the princess's hands that everyone coveted. All of them were extremely excited. I'm fine. Gong Dai shook his head. Just now, he seemed to have heard the royal sister calling him, but how could that be? She was in Yuchi right now, he smiled. Could it be that thinking of someone would cause hallucinations? At this moment, the rain had stopped. They had to hurry and meet up with the main group. Shao Qi was a talkative person. He still hasn't woken up from the power of the attack just now. His face was full of excitement. But because Gong Dai ordered him not to say anything, he could only ask something else. Your Highness, are we really going to build the road next? It was very boring and not fun at all. Gong Dai glanced at him. You go to Shizhou and do something. When Shao Qi heard that there was a new task, he quickly asked, what is it? Gong Dai gave his command token to him. Pass down this prince's order. Choose 3,000 elites from this prince's 30,000 troops and secretly come to Long City. This prince has a use for them. Could it be that he wants to build a private army? Build a private army that can have a body. Shao Qi's eyes lit up. He nodded repeatedly. But he still asked, I thought your highness would go to Yuchi to look for Princess Yuchi after leaving the capital. Gong Dai glanced at him coldly. He immediately stopped talking. After a while, when Xiaoqi thought that the prince was angry, Gong Dai said faintly, I also want to go. Ah. His voice was almost inaudible. But he couldn't go. Yuchi hadn't started the war yet because both sides were evenly matched. But if he went, not only would it aggravate the conflict, he might also be misunderstood by the people of Yuchi as Daiyu state wanting to start a war. Royal sister wouldn't want to see that scene, so he couldn't go now. But now was now, and the future was the future. As long as Yuchi started the war, he would help whoever royal sister wanted to help. No one would be able to blame Daiyu state. But they hadn't started the war for a long time. Should he do something secretly? He really wanted to see royal sister as soon as possible. She was so outstanding that he couldn't feel at ease wherever she went. Only by looking at her could he feel a little more at ease. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Gong Dai frowned slightly and began to think of ways to aggravate the conflict between them. He remained silent. Bai Chio was scared out of his wits. He held Gong Yimo with both hands and carefully used his face to feel Gong Yimo's breathing. He was relieved when he found that she was only unconscious. If she died because of this, he was afraid that he wouldn't feel good for the rest of his life. At this time, when Yuntian also came. He was an uncle in his 50s. He had a face full of beard and looked very strong. Young master, this is the princess of Gu State. When Yuntian stared with his bell-sized eyes and said in disbelief, she looks like a delicate little girl. Is she really as powerful as you said? Also, what was that sound just now? Where is the general? Bai Chio didn't know how to answer. At this time, a monkey pulled his clothes. Bai Chio lowered his head and saw that the monkey was pointing in a direction. Bai Chio was happy and quickly said, Uncle Wen, my father is there. Quickly go and save him. When Yuntian heard this, he quickly followed the monkey. Another elegant man in his 40s with a white face and no beard came and said to Bai Chio, Come, give her to Uncle Chang. You are also injured. Have a good rest. In fact, he knew that Bai Chio hated women since he was young, not to mention hugging them. So he was afraid that Bai Chio would feel uncomfortable and quickly came over to take her. Who knew that Bai Chio would avoid it and his handsome face was slightly red. It's okay. I will carry her. How could he be willing to let other men carry Gong Yimo? But there was no woman here. Chang Zaid was stunned. He saw that Bai Chio had already carried Gong Yimo without any reluctance. He touched his chin and suddenly sighed. It seemed that the young master was also enlightened. But with General Bai's identity, it would be difficult to carry the princess. Also, the young master usually didn't care about those women. It turned out that he hadn't met the right person. Look at him being so careful. It was the first time in his life. Chapter 447. They couldn't go back to the Longqing camp because the tiger tally was in Lu Jin's hands. If they went back, Lu Jin would turn the tables on them. The few thousand of them were nothing. So they found a place to camp and discussed what to do next. Gong Yimo was the only woman here. She lived alone in a tent. Bai Ji also asked the military doctor to check on her. He said that she was in a coma because of poison. It seemed that she hadn't eaten for a long time. She was very weak. There were no fatal injuries. She might wake up in a few days. Bai Chio twisted the handkerchief with water and gently wiped Gong Yimo's face. His movements were so careful as if he was afraid of hurting her. He couldn't imagine that a woman like her, in front of tens of thousands of people, would be able to tell them to leave without batting an eyelid. He didn't know how she managed to escape, but when he saw her fainted under the tree, he knew that it wouldn't have been easy. Later on, when there were pursuers, she still told him to leave first to get help. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was so useless. He called himself a man in vain. His father had told him when he was young that a man should have an indomitable spirit and should not run away in the face of battle. But tonight, he had violated both of those commandments. He was ashamed. He remembered clearly in his mind that when she used her inner strength to push him away, her red sleeves fluttering in the wind. The sleeves were stained with blood. It should represent evil. But in his eyes, it was more holy than the white veil. It was more seductive. Bai Chio's hand tightened. He couldn't remove the handkerchief on Gong Yimo's face. He didn't dare to look at that face again. When he looked at that face, he couldn't move his eyes away. He wanted to sink into it. So he could only look at her waist that was wrapped hastily. Because of her last counterattack, her waist was once again badly mutilated. Bai Chio suddenly felt heartache. How could he feel heartache for a woman? He didn't dare to think about it anymore. He quickly shook his head. He used a pair of scissors to cut the cloth on her waist and then carefully untied it. Sure enough, blood was still flowing. It was bright red, and it was a sharp contrast with her snow-white skin. Bai Chio's eyebrows jumped. He suddenly felt that it was a mistake to bandage her because it tested his willpower too much. But now, he was even more unwilling to let others bandage Gong Yimo. So he chanted the clear heart mantra in his heart while bandaging her. When he was done, his serious face was covered with sweat. It was as if he had just fought a tough battle. He was ready to leave after bandaging her, but Gong Yimo suddenly mumbled and then grabbed his hand. Bai Chio's heart was not pure to begin with. With her taking the initiative, he only felt that the hand she was holding was burning. But when he wanted to pull his hand away, he couldn't. Only he knew how much strength a person in a coma had. This kitten-like voice caused Bai Chio's serious expression to crack. His face turned red again. Even he didn't know what he was embarrassed about. He must leave. If he stayed any longer, he would feel weird. But this time, Gong Yimo really used some strength. She pulled him. Don't go. I'm in pain, she felt wronged. Even in her sleep, she pursed her lips as if she was going to cry. Bai Chio's heart softened. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But he still sat back. You only feel pain now. What were you doing earlier? Weren't you very fierce and domineering? You even said that you wanted to show me what it means to be a woman who is not inferior to a man. Bai Chio suddenly pursed his lips and smiled. How could those women who were not inferior to a man be compared to her? Thinking of this, he was suddenly shocked. He didn't understand why his feelings had changed. Why did he suddenly feel that he didn't hate women? The next day, Gong Yimo woke up. She saw Bai Chio beside her bed. She was shocked. You're awake. His voice was a little hoarse. His eyes were red. The bandage on the wound on his face was removed. The wound was beginning to scab. Gong Yimo looked at him puzzledly. You watched over me for the whole night. She was really flattered. Didn't this guy see women as poisonous? But when she thought of how she was injured because of their Bai family, she felt at ease. Bai Chio didn't answer her question. Seeing that Gong Yimo still couldn't move, he went out to get water for her to wash up. When she was washing up, Bai Chio went to bring breakfast. He was so considerate. Gong Yimo was stunned. Did this guy really become a slave? Gong Yimo was puzzled. She drank some porridge and lay down again. After a while, two people came in. When Yutian and Chang Zaid were a little embarrassed. After all, Gong Yimo was a beautiful girl. She was still recovering. It was not appropriate for them to come in. But the situation was critical now. They couldn't care less. They bowed and introduced themselves. Then, the two of them went straight to the point. Now that Longqing camp is controlled by Lu Jin, we have discussed a few countermeasures. Please help us. Gong Yimo nodded. She knew that the two of them were just trying to find a doctor in a desperate situation. After all, they didn't have many people now. Bai Ji was still unconscious. They felt helpless. And she had the highest status here. Naturally, they had to give her some face. But Gong Yimo didn't agree with their plan. Because the chance of winning was too small. Bai Ji was unconscious. They couldn't even find out the whereabouts of the other half of the tiger tally, let alone fight back. Then what is your opinion, Princess? Chang Zaid humbly asked for advice. His attitude was very sincere. Gong Yimo thought for a while. Let's wait for 2 days. If Lu Jin comes in these 2 days, we will hide. First, I need to rest and recover. Second, we will see if General Bai can wake up, Gong Yimo said and coughed a few times. Her body was indeed very weak. If General Bai can't wake up, I will borrow soldiers when I get better. Borrow soldiers. When Tian glared. He looked very fierce. His voice was also very loud. When he spoke, it was like a large bell. At this border, other than our Longqing camp, who else has soldiers? Even if there were, those people were just ants trying to shake a tree. Gong Yimo laughed softly. Her face was pale. But when she spoke, she had a calm and confident demeanor. You also said that this is the border. Longqing camp is the garrison of Daiyu State. Further north, isn't there Yuqi's garrison? You. When Tian didn't know what to say. Bai Chio and Chang Zaid were also shocked. They felt that her words were no less than a fairy tale. Borrow soldiers from Yuqi. Gong Yimo seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. She comforted them. Where there is a will, there is a way. Since I dared to say this to Yuqi, they naturally have some confidence in me. Other than that, do you have any better ideas? Chapter 448. An even better idea. Chang Zaid and the rest looked at each other. They really didn't have a better idea. But was it possible to borrow soldiers from Yuqi? Now that the civil war in Yuqi was about to break out, neither the Empress Dowager or the young emperor dared to act rashly. What if the other party misunderstood and started fighting? Well, this wasn't a problem that the people of Daiyu State needed to think about. Chang Zaid finally sighed. He should go and take care of the general. Maybe he would wake up after feeding him more ginseng soup. 3 days later, Gong Yimo's injuries were slightly better, but Lu Jin and the rest didn't give up. They tried to find Gong Yimo a few times, but they were evaded by the wetlands and forests. Lu Jin was getting more and more anxious. Although Bai Ji looked better, he didn't show any signs of waking up. Gong Yimo made a prompt decision to bring Bai Ji to Yuqi. First, to seek medical treatment. Second, to borrow soldiers. No matter what, it was the only way. In the end, they sat in a makeshift carriage. Gong Yimo and Bai Ji, the two patients, sat in the carriage while Bai Chio and Chang Zaid took turns to drive the carriage. They really went to Yuqi. With Yuqi's invitation, Gong Yimo entered Yuqi easily. Even Chang Zaid was surprised. He didn't expect that he would be able to enter Yuqi so openly in his lifetime. Yuqi was now under martial law. Entry and exit were strictly prohibited. Now, only the shops that the Prince of Qi had set up in Yuqi could still operate. The other people had been chased away long ago. After passing through the checkpoint, Gong Yimo continued to walk and finally stopped at the border town, Moon City. Chang Zaid couldn't figure out Gong Yimo's thoughts and said, "Princess, the border forces are now divided into two groups. One is controlled by Empress Dowager Yuqi, and the other is controlled by the little emperor. You're acting so rashly, where do you want to borrow troops?" Gong Yimo shook her head. "It's not appropriate to borrow soldiers from either side. If I borrow from the emperor, he will be worried that the Empress Dowager's men will take advantage of the situation. If I borrow from the Empress Dowager, she will think the same." Bai Qiu was expressionless. "Then why did you say that you wanted to borrow soldiers?" Gong Yimo seemed to see that the two men were very depressed. She stroked Little Monkey and smiled. "Don't you know how to be flexible? We can borrow from both sides." Chang Zaid couldn't help but ask. "But you're a guest invited by Emperor Yuqi." The clearance document just now was Emperor Yuqi's jade seal, and they had cleared it at the Emperor's border camp. How could the Empress Dowager lend troops to someone who was helping her opponent? Gong Yimo giggled. "Where there's a will, there's a way. I've said it from the beginning. How would we know if we don't try?" Although she said that, she already had a plan in mind. They found a place to stay in Moon City. Then, Gong Yimo sent a letter to the Emperor of Yuqi, asking him to meet her. Yes, she wanted him to come and see her. Since he had a favor to ask of her, how could he not appear? These few days, Bai Qiu and the rest were very anxious. Perhaps Gong Yimo was very anxious, but she still looked calm and composed, as if she had a card up her sleeve. On the third day, Gong Yimo finally met the person who wanted to meet her. Unexpectedly, the person who came first was not Si Wuyan, but Empress Dowager Yuqi. Gong Yimo was invited to a private room. When the curtain was lifted, she was surprised to see a graceful and luxurious woman. She was much younger than when they met in her previous life. She was dressed very delicately from head to toe. Now, she was only in her 30s. She took good care of herself and had power and influence. That kind of nobility was far from what an ordinary lady could have. It was a kind of natural dignity. Seeing this legendary woman, Gong Emo was surprised but quickly calmed down. In her previous life, she and Empress Dowager Yuqi had fought several times and could be considered to have a mutual understanding of each other. Gong Emo admired a woman who was able to hold power step by step during the feudal era. It was just that this Empress Dowager had some wisdom and courage. She just lacked a little benevolence and the ability to rule a country. Otherwise, the civil strife in her previous life would not have lasted for 10 years until she fought her way in. And now that she was here, it proved that in Yuqi, her power was still stronger than the emperor. Gong Yimo gave a junior's greeting. Empress Dowager Yuqi, Dong Wani, was also sizing up Gong Yimo. The clothes she wore were East Continent snow brocade. Every inch of the brocade was gold. The brocade was gorgeous and under the sun, it shone like pearls. It was beautiful beyond words. On the other hand, the young lady was dressed very elegantly. But the blue sky after rain was very pleasing to the eye. She took a closer look and found that it was made from the cloud sky brocade that Yuheng could only get once a year. It was low-key and luxurious. She wore a full set of jewelry on her head. It was made from Nanhai Jin's 100-year-old Eastern pearls. The brilliance was restrained and each pearl was worth 1,000 gold. But the young lady opposite her only wore a hairpin, but that hairpin was a gorgeous blue color. It was extraordinary. With one look, she could tell that it was Jinshu Master's Dian jadeite craftsmanship that was not passed on to outsiders. It was priceless. With one look, she knew what to do. She had a basic understanding of this young lady who seemed to be low-key and simple, but was actually filled with glory and splendor. Not to mention that calm temperament, it was a style that she had never seen before. She thought that there was no woman in the world who could stand shoulder to shoulder with her. But after seeing this young lady who was rumored to have amazing skills, she could not find a trace of inferiority. So she sighed and said, "Princess is too courteous." Princess came from afar. Aija came to see you and wanted to do the honors of a host. Gong Yimo did not mention at all why she sent a letter to Si Wuyan, but the one who came was her. After saluting, she sat beside the Empress Dowager and sat at the same level as her. Her dignified manner was not inferior to that of the Empress Dowager. Dong Wani could not help but raise her spirits and said softly, "I wonder what princess came to Yuchi for." Gong Yimo smiled, revealing her white teeth. "One does not visit a temple without a cause. I came to ask Yuchi for a favor." Dong Wani expressed her disbelief. Wasn't it Si Wuyan, that brat, who specially invited her to help? How did it become that she had a favor to ask of Yuchi? Gong Yimo saw that Dong Wani was confused, so she frankly told her what happened at the Longqing barracks. Then she sighed. It's embarrassing to say that this is a family matter. But as the saying goes, distant water cannot put out a nearby fire. So, I want to borrow troops from Yuchi. Dong Wani thought it was funny. Her hibiscus face showed a timely expression of surprise. "Princess, aren't you afraid that it's easy to borrow troops, but in the end, you're inviting a wolf into the house?" Dong Wani did not know if this lass was really stupid or pretending to be stupid. She was honest about the chaotic situation at the borders of Daiyu State. If she borrowed troops from Yuchi, wouldn't it be easy for Yuchi to directly invade Daiyu State? Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo shook her head. How could it be inviting a wolf into the house? It's just like if I asked you to borrow troops, you should not refuse. Oh. Dong Wani suppressed her sarcasm and blinked. Aija wants to hear Princess's opinion. Chapter 449. Gong Yimo pretended not to hear the mockery and continued, "Empress Dowager, think about it. If you don't help us at this critical juncture, what will happen to our Daiyu State's enemies when you fight with the little emperor in the future?" Dong Wani only smiled and didn't reply. If they wanted to go against her, they had to have the ability to do so. As if understanding her thoughts, Gong Yimo pretended to be surprised and said, "You're so calm. Are you prepared?" She raised her eyebrows and said with a wicked smile, "Let me guess. Recently, I brought Bai Ji to visit all the famous doctors in Moon City, but they were all helpless. I've never heard of such a brilliant poison. I've never heard of Daiyu State, but I know a thing or two about Yuchi. For example, if we're talking about using poison, who in this world can compare to you? Empress Dowager." Only then did Dong Wani say contemptuously, "There's no proof. What does Bai Ji's matter have to do with me? Princess, don't slander me." Gong Yimo lowered her head and chuckled. "I'm just guessing. I'm guessing that someone in Yuchi helped Lu Jin with the condition that when Yuchi has internal strife in the future, Lu Jin has to send troops to repay the favor. Isn't that normal?" Seeing Dong Wani's slightly cold expression, Gong Yimo continued, "I'm ashamed to say this. I originally wanted to ask the Emperor of Yuchi for help. After all, he's a disciple of you, so a mere poison shouldn't be a problem. It's just that I met you first, Empress Dowager, so I thought of asking you for help directly. I didn't mean to suspect anything, so don't misunderstand." Dong Wani secretly gritted her teeth. She felt that Gong Yimo was really smart. She could suspect her just by looking at the source of the poison. How troublesome. If she didn't act according to her wishes and detoxified the poison, she would definitely look for Si Wuyan. And with Si Wuyan's talent and intelligence, it wouldn't be difficult for him to detoxify the poison. After thinking it through, she said softly, although I don't know the cause of Bai Ji's poison, it will be easy for me to detoxify it. I just don't know how Princess will repay me. Gong Yimo said obediently, the only way to repay me is that when Dayu State has internal strife, Dragon City Camp will not interfere. Dong Wuani's expression and hesitation. Originally, if Gong Yimo didn't come, she could get Lu Jin's help during Yu Qi's internal strife. But now that she was here, not only saved by Ji, she even lose Dragon City Camp's help. How could she be willing now? Gong Emo faintly said, the Empress Dowager is wise. She should understand that when Yu Qi is in internal strife, the best solution is to not intervene. Seeing that Dong Wuani was still hesitant and unhappy, Gong Emo smiled and said, it's fine if you agree, but if you refuse, I'll go and ask Si Wuyan. I'm afraid that when the time comes, not only will the Dragon City Camp not be involved, but they might even help your enemy. Dong Wuani's sharp eyes suddenly stared at Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo didn't feel guilty at all. They looked at each other, and the air between them seemed to freeze. After a while, the Empress covered her face with a feather fan and said softly, Princess from Dayu State, has anyone ever told you that you are arrogant? She was threatening her in such a blatant manner, and in her own territory. Did she really think she didn't dare to kill? Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows, as if she didn't feel the tense atmosphere. Arrogant? I'm just a little bold. It's like I'm not only asking you for medicine, but also to borrow soldiers from you. If I'm arrogant, what should I do in the future? Gong Yimo pretended to be distressed. Dong Wuani waved her feather fan. She looked delicate and noble, but she was angry. Gong Yimo heard the sound of a sword being unsheathed from behind the screen. She sneered. As far as I know, you haven't recovered from your serious injuries. What if the Princess of Dayu State dies here? Dong Wuani began to think about this possibility. Once Gong Yimo died, no one would meddle in her business, and the Dragon City Battalion would still be under her control. 50,000 people would be a great help. Originally, she wanted to cooperate with Bai Ji, but Bai Ji was stubborn. No matter how much she offered, he wouldn't betray the Emperor of Dayu State. Therefore, if Bai Ji couldn't wake up, Gong Yimo couldn't live either. Gong Yimo thought that this was the beauty of a snake and scorpion. She was ready to kill her, but there was no murderous intent in her tone. It was as if she was just asking. She shook her head and sneered. I don't think this is a good idea. If I die here, Yu Qi will be in danger. She directly threatened Dong Wuani. She was telling her that if she dared to hurt her, the entire Yu Qi would be finished. Her fearlessness made Dong Wuani hesitate. As the Empress Dowager of a country, she had many eyes and ears. Naturally, she knew that Gong Yimo was sent here because she didn't get along with the Emperor of Dayu State. Therefore, she looked down on Gong Yimo. Who didn't know that Yu Qi was about to go to war? She was sent here at this time. Even if she had some ability, wouldn't it be more dangerous? However, when she heard Gong Yimo's tough words, she hesitated. Perhaps Gong Yimo's attitude was too calm, or perhaps she was too arrogant. She definitely had some ability. Gong Yimo threw out the last sentence. Don't forget, I have something that father is very interested in. If I die here, do you think father will fly into a rage out of humiliation? Her words completely made Dong Wuani give up the idea of taking the risk. She gritted her teeth unwillingly. Seeing the cooked duck fly away just like that, she felt very depressed. Dong Wuani lay back and someone immediately rubbed her forehead. She closed her eyes, as if she didn't want to look at Gong Yimo again. You child, really, it's hard to like you. Dong Wuani sighed faintly. Feeling the atmosphere in the room suddenly relax, Gong Yimo rubbed her nose and smiled apologetically without speaking. Forget it. Seeming to have made up her mind, Dong Wani said charmingly, I can save people, but I can't borrow soldiers. You also know that Ijia's Fingyi camp and the Emperor's Weihe camp have always been competitors. What if I lend Fingyi's people to you, but Weihe's people take advantage of the situation and invade the camp? Moreover, after Bai Ji wakes up, what if he secretly helps Si Wuyan in order to take revenge on Ijia? Are you going to help Ijia resolve these matters? Of course. Dong Wani frankly admitted to poisoning, so Gong Yimo didn't hesitate. You don't have to worry about Bai Ji. After he wakes up, he won't look for you because he listens to me. Dong Wani didn't believe it. He only listens to the Emperor of Daiyu State. This was also the reason why she gave up on Bai Ji in the beginning. It was because he was stubborn that she changed her target to Lu Jin. Gong Yimo reached out and turned the gold medal in her hand. Do you see it? As if Shen is here in person, what I mean is father's intention. This time, Dong Wani suddenly sat up straight and stared at the gold medal. It really was the Emperor's personal gold medal. It was actually in Gong Yimo's hands. She rejoiced in her heart. Fortunately, she didn't make a move just now. This princess seemed to have the Emperor's heart. She couldn't be touched. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.